Hi, everybody. Welcome to Mormonish. I'm Rebecca,
And I'm Landon.
and I'm actually really excited about this podcast. This is going to be very interesting. It's, of course, about Fairview again, right?
Yep.
Always in the news, always something going on, but this is a little bit different. So let's just go right to our slides and dive right in. All right. I love this. This is the Fairview logo, town of Fairview, Texas, keeping it country. Like I said, this is what we're talking about tonight. And there really isn't a ton of new news. We all know what happened last week on the 27th of January. The LDS Church delivered a letter to the town council with intent to sue. Is there anything else you want to add to that, Landon?
Yeah, they basically said we're going to sue you that you're breaking the non-binding agreement because you said things that weren't flattering about us. Although the non-binding agreement said nothing about that, it just said they had to do two things, both of which the city did. Just because the city wasn't happy with the church kind of threw a fit and took their ball and went home and said, we're going to sue you. So we wanted to kind of see what's the feedback from the believing members, because as we always know, the church always has to spin it. They've tried to make it look like it was all the mayor's fault that this broke apart because he said mean things, which he said true things, that the church was bullying them, the church pressured them, and that they were agreeing to this simply because the church had deep pockets and was threatening to bankrupt the town if they took this to court. And all of that is true, but the church didn't like that that's what they said, and so they decided to sue to prove them wrong, I guess.
Oh my gosh. And if you have no idea what we're talking about, on the Mormonish YouTube channel, you can click on Temple Playlist and you'll see all the podcasts that we have done about the various temple scenarios. And we have quite a few in the last couple of weeks about Fairview as all of this unfolded. But you're right. What we're going to talk about today is sort of the faithful take. I love to go on faithful social media just to kind of take the pulse of what's happening. And so this is going to be a really interesting dive into some of the comments and thoughts and reactions to this suit announced by the church. So if you go to the next slide, there was one little piece of news that came out of the area that somebody made me aware of, and it's actually good news, great news. It says the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints sends aid to Prosper after food pantry fire. Now, Prosper was where the LDS temple was first announced by President Nelson over the pulpit, and then of course, whatever happened, we don't know why it moved, but it moved over to Fairview. So apparently there was a fire in a food bank, and an LDS member who was involved in volunteerism there in the community contacted the church and said, hey, this happened. Let's donate some food. So this was a big headline. It was in different papers, and it's positive PR, right, for the LDS church, where some of the other headlines are saying LDS church sues. Here's some headlines where they brought a trailer full of food, Landon, isn't that right, from their Deseret food production, and they
Yeah.
drove it down to Texas to help restock that food bank.
Yeah, I commend you for doing that. That's great. I do notice that this is the Dallas Morning News.
Mm-hmm.
The same people who had to call and ask the church why, what was happening, and they were lied to and told that the church did intend to file the plans and that they were just trying to make sure everything was in order, and then put out, a statement that they never said they were going to sue, and then they decide to sue the town. And again, never called the Dallas Morning News to
Yeah.
tell them they were going to sue the town of Fairview, but they certainly made sure that they knew the food was coming down there. So, although it's a great thing that the food went down there, I looked at it. It was I can't remember how many pallets. Figure $500 a pallet. It was probably about $50,000 in food somewhere in there. So that's a great thing. Nobody's saying anything, but when you look at it, that they were willing to spend $50,000 to help food, but they're going to spend $5 million to sue the town of Fairview, it kind of puts it into perspective that the church would rather put its money into legal actions and into building a tall building than they would to actually helping people. So although it's a good thing in one way, we have to sit back and look at the whole picture and what the church, where the church is really putting its money, and they're putting far more money into legal maneuvering than they ever are into the support of the community.
That is such a good point. And it would be very interesting to even try to estimate what these legal costs are in these different towns, because it's got to be astronomical as we see town after town. So that's a very interesting perspective.
Yeah, if this goes to court, it'll be millions of dollars from both sides. So,
Yeah.
$5 million might be the church's portion, but Fairview's got to spend the same amount defending themselves. So here's $10 million that could be used, for community good, and instead
Mhm.
it's being used fighting over the height of a steeple that could easily be lowered and meet the code requirements very simply at this point.
Yep.
Instead, $10 million is going to be spent doing that rather than doing the Lord's work. So you gotta put it in perspective and ask. I mean, it's great that they sent food to this place. It is at a time they needed much PR, good PR in this town or in this area because of the going-ons and the negative reports of the way they're behaving. So this is a small step to say, look at the good we're doing in the community, but it pales when you say we're going to spend $5 million now bankrupting a town. So.
Yeah. Apples and oranges. And there was also, I should say, I think it was an Instagram reel. It was something else where the mayor of Prosper got up and said, this is incredible. The LDS church has helped us. So definitely the PR wheels are spinning to show that, look, we're trying to help you guys. But you're right. On the other hand, there's this other stuff going on. And I'll make a prediction that there may be a little bit of stepping up in positive PR, things that they can do, or making sure that the things that they already do make it into the news. So we'll watch that. And of course, that's what any corporation would do. When there's something negative happening, they want to make sure that you see, but we're also doing good. So if you go to the next slide, there was something that did not make it into the headline that I thought was interesting. So there was Temple News that came out on January 28th. And that's just a rundown in the church newsroom of all the exciting things that are happening with temples, live links people can click on. So it says this page provides a summary of recent news about the many houses of the Lord built around the world by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So it kind of goes backwards in chronology. On January 21st, you can click on this link and there's news for the temple groundbreaking in the Philippines and England. That's very exciting. Then you go to January 28th. There's an open house and a dedication announced for the Syracuse, Utah temple, which is right by you, isn't it, Landon? I think we might try to go. Mm-hmm. But we know what happened on the 27th, and that was not included in the temple news for the saints to read. So I kind of fixed it. I said January 27th, delivered intent to sue letter to Fairview Town Council. So that's temple news, but it didn't make it into this list here on the church newsroom.
All the temple news we want you to know. That's what they put there.
That's a good way to say it. So, yep, that's right there, January 27th. So, and it didn't mention the letter on the 13th either. So anyway, those were just a few little updates. But what we're really going to talk about here is, what do faithful LDS members think about the Fairview Temple situation? And I was on Faithful social media. I saw a post. There's, different articles and headlines. And I thought, well, this will be very interesting to see what they're saying. And of course, they're in a subreddit for the faithful. So they're talking amongst themselves and sharing their opinions. And it was not what I expected at all. There were probably, last time I looked, like 277 comments. That's quite a few. And they're still kind of rolling in. I've had other people draw my attention to this. In fact, one of our really sharp viewers of Mormonish, she posted that thread on Mormonish, and I had to contact her. I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Can we take that down? Because I'm doing an episode on it. And if everybody reads the comments ahead of time, spoilers." So thank you very much for taking that down so that we could do the episode. But it is fascinating. And I did find that a lot of faithful on this thread pushed back. They, as we'll go through the comments, said this is not a good look. It's not worth it. So I think this is very interesting. I also saw that there was a lot of misinformation that people were quoting. Now, some of these people are from Fairview. Some are just LDS members, other places that have been following temples. But I think you'll be really fascinated, like I was, as we kind of dive into the comments. And of course, this picture is that address to the town council that we always talk about, where the woman got up and talked about how she was married in the Boston temple when it did not have a steeple. And she said, did I get married? Yes. Was my wedding diminished without the steeple? Yes, it was. Then she kind of goes, hold up the picture, honey. So I don't know why
I got stuck with because of the small steeple, guys.
I don't know why this always strikes me. It's so funny. I mean, it's not, she really, felt it, and she really feels her marriage was diminished by being married in a short building. But I just think it's so interesting.
Poor guy's got to be sitting there going, "Oh, well, thanks, honey."
I know, but the main reason I put this picture up is because it shows at these meetings, you can see the green shirts. They're there with their opinion, and those are the people that represent the residents, who are mostly not LDS, and they want to speak their piece about this temple that's too tall for the zoning codes and the ordinances. And then the members, of course, were told to show up in their white shirts, and they were speaking for the temple. I like the guy that seems to be, is he asleep? I'm not sure. Or he's just like,
that's the sacrament meeting pose. And notice all the Mormons have their arms crossed, the closed off position.
No, I think a lot of you will agree with me. Do you find yourself folding your arms all the time? I'm not kidding. I do. I find myself like this all the time. And it's just because ever since you were 18 months old, they told you to do it. But that is the pose right there. So anyway, we're going to talk about what faithful members think about this whole Fairview situation and the recent announcement of the lawsuit. That's the focus here. So before this popped up, there's always something on whatever topic I want to talk about. I thought this was great. This was on a not faithful Mormon social media, and a woman posted, and she said she had sent a text to her parents who are faithful LDS, and not telling them it was about Fairview. It was just sort of a hypothetical scenario. Do you want to read that text that she sent them?
Yeah, so she sent this to her parents asking this question?
Yeah, she just thought, what would somebody think if they didn't know it was a temple? If it was just a random building, would your opinion be different if you didn't know it was a temple?
Okay, this should be interesting.
Yeah.
Say what you want to build a tall building in a small town. The height of the building is way taller than zoning laws allow. The town is willing to let you build it if you make it short enough to meet the law's height. You hold several meetings with the town to convince them to let you make it as tall as you want, but they stick to their laws. Let it be noted that the building's height has nothing to do with what goes on inside. There's plenty of room. Is suing the town a reasonable response?
Yeah, so that's just kind of a hypothetical question that she's posing to, I think, her dad, So then the dad writes back, only for the Sioux happy who think that that is the way to make a buck. We live in a world not unlike the world in the Nephite time, where the lawyers and judges stirred up the people to anger to make a buck too. And then what does she say back in the text, Landon?
Funny you should mention the Book of Mormon in reply to this thought experiment, because the situation above is exactly what Fairview, Texas is in with your church.
There it is. So I don't think there was a response after that I saw, but that's exactly it. Are the blinders on because this is your church? This is what the Lord wants, If it was a Walmart coming in and pulling these things, most people probably would feel like the dad feels right here. So I just thought that was a really interesting exercise that she just wanted to put out a hypothetical and see how her parents really felt. So, all right. So let's just dive into some of these comments. These are copied and pasted. Sometimes when we do these kinds of episodes with comments, people say, you made those up. I do not make them up. These are actually from social media. Of course, I've redacted any name because we're just going to kind of talk about the context. And there were so many more comments than what we're going to show, but I tried to pick some that represented each point of view in each tone. So do you want to read this first one, Landon? Again, it was just an article posted about the lawsuit, and these are people weighing in on faithful LDS social media.
Yeah, it says, unfortunately, it looks like the deal has now fell through. Despite privately approving of the compromise design, the town council bragged publicly that they'll push the church for an even smaller design. They called the church a bully and encouraged residents to call church headquarters to pressure them for a smaller temple than the one agreed to during mediation. Because of this, the church has withdrawn all their applications and is now exploring legal options.
Yeah, so some of those are things that you could say some of those things happen, but spun in a different way. What do you think about that, that synopsis?
Well, a couple problems I see. They said despite privately approving, they did not privately approve the compromise design. They unanimously approved in open session, in executive session,
Mhm.
that they supported the design. So the town council did exactly what they did. Now the town pushed back, and the town, the town people in the
Mhm.
meeting that they were required to have pushed back. So the town council went to the church and said, it'd really nice if we went smaller. We're not sure that people are still going to accept this.
Mhm.
We're still supporting it. We're still doing what we said, but it would really help if you could go with a smaller design. And the church is a bully. And to say they told,
Landon says it.
yeah, the church has been. The whole reason they're in this they went to mediation was because the church is threatening to sue, regardless of what the town went through all the procedures that are required. The church got to present its temple design, and the town unanimously, both in planning and zoning and in the town council, unanimously said this building doesn't fit our zoning laws and shouldn't be built here. But the church then says, well, we're a church. We have this RLUIPA card we're going to play, and we're going to sue you. So unlike the Muslims in McKinney next door, who had the same experience where their mosque was too big, it was one building, too many square feet, and they had to pull that back. The Muslims said, we're going to work with the community and try to fix this. They didn't go straight to RLUIPA and threaten to. That's not bullying. There you're working with the community. The
Right.
church has always used the threat of a lawsuit to try to get what they want. The agreed to size was all because of a threat of the lawsuit, and the mayor pointed that out. And to say they encourage residents to call church headquarters to pressure them for a smaller temple, what are they supposed to tell them?
Yeah.
They publicly agreed and voted that they would support this smaller version of the temple. So when the people are arguing, what are they supposed to do? Say, call me, because I can't do anything about
Call
it.
corporate.
The only people who can change the size of the temple right now is the church.
Right.
Why is the church so opposed to people calling and expressing their opinion on this statement? But the church has not given any phone number. They haven't given any representatives. They haven't given any place for anybody to call. So when people are complaining to the town in the open meeting that was a requirement of the mediation, what's the town supposed to say?
Yeah.
If you want it smaller, call the church and let them know, because we can't do anything about it. It's their design. It's their
Exactly.
proposal. They have to make the change.
Yeah, well, and I think that the LDS person who wrote this knows that nobody calls Salt Lake. Like, that's just such an absurd thing to tell someone to do. But of course, in the real world, hey, yeah, get a hold of corporate, express your feelings, So again, like I said, these things happened in a way, but the spin is different on both sides. And because a lot of people just don't understand LDS culture, they don't understand the way it works, they don't understand it. So
for anyone in the real world saying, hey, call these guys who are making the application, is a perfectly, if Walmart's building a building that you don't like, you say, call Walmart and let them know that you don't like it. But the church is, because to question any church authority to a church member is the grandest, biggest thing you can do to show your unfaithfulness. These people aren't faithful members of your church.
They have no idea.
They can't understand why there is nobody to call.
There's no one to call.
Yeah.
Who are you going to call? No one.
No one.
Anyway, so right after this comment, go to the next slide, is this comment. So someone says, this isn't the best summarization, and that paints the town in a bad light. The town had some reps that mediated, but they were unsure that the new design would be approved by a vote by the rest of their board members due to negative feedback from Fairview residents. Here is an excerpt from the article. On December 20th, the sides held a video conference. According to the church's attorney's letter, Lessner, that's the mayor, told church representatives that while he and the mayor pro tem intended to vote for the mediated settlement, they did not know how others would vote in wake of the negative reaction from some of the residents. Exactly. It kind of sounds like they agreed. Residents said, heck no. And the town officials said, okay, fine. Then you just need to call the church and tell them, and responded to the pushback from the residents to try to make it happen. So this person sees it, in a more, I don't know, just kind of an even keel of a light. and doesn't see it as bullying or reneging on an agreement. They're just like, yeah, these are the events that happened. So, but I have this picture here of somebody trying to call the church. It's just not going to happen. Nobody, and I always say that to the residents, even the faithful members can't call the church. You can't write the church. If you write a letter, it goes back down to your local leaders so that they can deal with you there. Again, they just have no understanding of that. So it's kind of
And remember, the church asked their members, 15,000
yes,
who didn't even live in Fairview, to write
yes,
Fairview at the last minute. And so the
yeah,
church is
emails.
encouraging their members to write to the town council, but they're not encouraging anyone to write to the church and express their feelings. So that's the problem. But this is dead on. I feel like this is very well said. This is what happened.
Mhm.
The town agreed to it, and they're saying that the mayor can agree, and all that the agreement did is said that we will support, but we haven't seen the temple yet. You haven't
Mhm.
produced anything yet. They say we agree to support this, but they cannot force the planning and zoning board to accept it. The P&Z board is a government body. It's going to be brought, the town saying we recommend that you approve this, but they can't dictate how the planning and zoning board votes. And they said, based on the feedback in the open session that we were required to have as part of the mediation, that puts in doubt whether everybody's going to be on board. There's still a lot of pushback. So they're asking the church, throw us a bone here to help you get this thing through. We want to get this through. Everyone wants this done. Can they're basically saying, why don't you try lowering the steeple a little bit more, and then it might be more palatable and we can push this thing through. Sure, it's not what's in the mediation, but you guys were right there at the at the open information meeting. You saw the pushback. You saw that people are still upset. Help us help you
Yes.
by re-looking at this and saying, maybe when you submit your plan, you could come with something a little closer to what was
Mhm.
discussed previously. And then we can, because all it said was up to 120 feet with the steeple. It didn't say it had to be 120 feet. They could come back with 70 feet. They could come back with 70 feet with a needle on top that takes it up to 100 feet, but it really looks like it stops at 70 feet. They could do some things to help
Mhm.
push this through. And that's what I think that's what the town is saying in the background is, help us help you. But the
Mhm.
church is saying, you broke this. Well, they didn't. They did everything that was required, and they have recommended approval of it. It has to go through the process, though,
Yep.
and they're saying you're making it tough because nobody from the church came to the meeting and stood up and said anything positive, and so it looks like the town's completely against it.
Yeah, no, that's true. But I thought it was great that this person kind of saw it, I'm like, this is awesome,
Yeah, yep, good on
because
them.
just to paint the town people as, the way that they are, that it's not there's a middle ground, if you understand all the sides of it, and understanding each side is what then leads to a reconciliation or an answer or something. And in fact, I was going to read this because you were talking about the needle. I just saw this tonight. It was an old update, and I'm sorry I don't have a slide. It was from 2022 about the Yorba Linda, California temple, which is a temple we have podcasted about before and said this would fit so perfectly here,
Mhm.
right there on the site. So this is from the church's website about temples. It says the First Presidency of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has approved the revised image for the Yorba Linda, California temple due to permitting and zoning requirements. The redesign focuses on the spire, which has been lowered. It has also been moved from the center of the building to just above the entrance. So this was just a few years ago, and we've talked about this before. Here's a temple where there was back and forth with the town, and they redesigned it to meet the codes. And we never heard anything about this 2 years ago, did we? There was no, articles or bullying or lawsuits. They simply worked behind the scenes and revised it, and it's built. So very interesting.
I think the difference is California is very tight on their zoning laws, and they knew that
Yes.
California would fight. And
Yep.
Texas is now saying, hey, we're the same way. We've got zoning laws too, and we should be
Yep.
able to stand up for our zoning laws and be able to enforce them as well. So why the church is okay redefining it in California? Also remember they have a large population of LDS people in
Yep.
California, and the church doesn't want to look bad, have its members embroiled in this. But some reason in Texas they're willing to drag the members through this. You you set the precedent. You've set precedents that we will conform with the building law and codes. We do it outside in Europe all the time. The church does
And
it.
here in Yorba Linda.
They did it here in California, but they're unwilling to do it in Texas. And that just, why? Why couldn't you just do the same thing you just did in Yorba Linda? And there's now $10 million from both sides that can be used for community good rather than for legal action by simply doing the same thing you just did in Yorba Linda.
Yeah, well, somebody pointed out that it's perhaps Texas has stronger religious freedom protections, and they feel like they could gain more traction in court. You know, somebody said red state, blue state. I mean, I don't know if that factors into it. That would be fascinating. But okay, let's go to our next slide.
Religious freedom, religious privilege. That's what
I know. I love that phrase that you religious privilege. That's Landon's new phrase. So, all right, let's go to the next slide. Do you want to read this one, Landon?
I often wonder why the church announces temples long before all plans and approvals are finalized. On a side note, even now, if the church goes to court and it's ruled in their favor, the church will look like a bully, innocent or not, and then they have a bad reputation in the area.
See, great, insightful comment, right?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, obviously, they're going to have to announce the temple before because otherwise people are going to find out during the process and go, what? We're getting a temple. But they do it so long before. They literally do it years before. I mean, look at the announcement of the Moscow, Russia temple. I mean, that was announced, what, 7 years ago or something like that?
Back burner, yeah.
Yeah, still not it. China, they announced one in China.
China is decommissioned. It is no longer on the list after China said, well, no.
Well, we don't know anything about this. Yeah, so it's great if you're just announcing we intend to put one somewhere around this area. That's fine. But I can understand why they would announce it before. But if you're going to announce it, you need to be flexible and say, hey, we're going to put one in this area. We don't know exactly what town it's going to be in, and we'll be working, and we don't know what the final design is going to be like. We'll work with the local community and we'll make it work. If you go in with the intent that, hey, we're going to work with the community and try to make this happen, that's much better than saying we're going to force this down their throat. The reason they look like a bully is because when the town says no, they all say, well, the Lord has commanded this. You're going against the Lord. We cannot change. We can. If you go in with the, hey, we'll do what's necessary to get it through their zoning laws and build what ends up being accepted by whatever community we decide to build in, then there's no bullying. Everyone would say they have a right to build a temple. Nobody's saying you don't have a right to build a temple here. Everyone's just saying it just needs to conform with the local ordinances, and it needs to go through the proper process, just like any other building. And we know the temple is special to LDS people, but to a town that is not in Utah, it's just another building. Mm-hmm. There's no special privilege. They look at, but the church looks at it as we have this trump card, Rupa, that we can throw down at any time, and we can put anything we want on that land, and you guys should have no say in it. And the towns are pushing back and saying that's simply not true. We have a planning and zoning commission for a reason. It's to protect everyone's property rights.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. And part of their appearance as a bully is lack of transparency, not being truthful in initial letters to residents saying, oh, it's just a one-story building. Residents take note of this kind of thing. There's so many other ways to handle it. And we've even seen recently the church will go in ahead of time and not say who they are in zoning meetings. They will just say a religious entity, and we've seen one, I think it was it in Missouri, where they kept asking, can you tell me who you are? And the representative is like, no, we cannot. I mean, when you start with that foot through the door, everybody's always going to view you with suspicion. And this faithful member here said, we look like a bully, whether, we have the right or not, it's bad for the reputation. So people are seeing it, reasonable people are seeing it. Let's go to the next slide. So here's another comment. It says, most of what you said, and they're talking about that first person who made that statement, either isn't in the article or contradicts what the article actually said. And we're talking about the Dallas Morning News. We'll link that in the show notes so you guys can look at it. I'm not trying to argue that the church is wrong at all. Just give context to the situation as it is not villainize, as to not villainize either side. And that's very important. It also continues to paint the town in a bad light. The truth of the matter is that the town officials negotiated in good faith. Then the residents pushed back on the results of those negotiations. And so the town officials are responding to the concerns of their constituents. I think that you would want the same thing if you brought up concerns to your local government. You have to kind of see the shoe on your own foot, and this person is looking at that. Whether or not those concerns are truly actionable is to be seen. That's the purpose of the lawsuit. And on some level, I'm sure the town officials are happy that a court will be making decisions so they can say it was out of their hands. This isn't town officials being discriminatory. Could the residents be? Maybe, but they also might have genuine concerns too. It's okay to not play the victim and let the legal proceedings play out just how the system was designed. So this person is very level-headed too, and saying neither side needs to be the villain, honestly.
Yeah, I agree. They're seeing it that, hey, the town doesn't want this. It's unfortunate that it has to go to court, because the far better way than legal proceedings letting this play out, and a far better way than the town council making the decision, is let the church make the decision. Mm-hmm. The church has options. The town can only approve what the church puts forth. Mm-hmm. So it's all in the church's hands. The town can't modify what the church presents. They can only say yes or no. But the church can modify what the church puts forth. And that's why the town is saying, hey, there's still some concerns here. And what they're really doing is they're doing a backdoor, hey, this still might be in trouble. We're supporting it, we're recommending it, but we can't control the vote. So help yourself here, make a few changes. You heard what was said, and that'll help your chances. So that the town is actually trying to help the church by saying,
yeah,
try making a few changes and we think this thing will go right through, but the church will have none of it. Yep. So, again, why tie up the courts? Why tie up millions of dollars? Even if this went to a small, you're looking $1 million easy, yep, with lawyers and everybody involved. Why? Nobody wants to spend this money. So why not just say, look, we can make a few little small changes and we'll present it. And if you're willing to look at it and say, we can change a few things, we've got some plans that work, why not do that? Why it has to be this design exactly? We already saw that they can change it. They just changed it to a smaller building. You can lower the steeple on this. You don't lose any square footage. You don't lose anything you can do in the temple. You still have a spire that makes you look up. And you avoid all of this. Why not just say we can do that? Instead, you're digging in and fighting and calling religious, it's our religious right, religious freedom. Nobody else is building any taller than this. So this is religious freedom. You're allowed to build your temple. You're allowed to put it where you want. You're allowed to put a design, any design you want that conforms with the building codes. You have religious freedom. Nobody's discriminating against you and saying you can't build here. But they want religious privilege, which is you can't tell us what to do. We get to break every rule of your town because we're a church. And that's what the town is saying. No, that's not what this means. So
yeah, no, I love that phrase that you came up with, religious privilege. That's exactly what it is. And I agree with you. And as we said before, we don't even really know what the rendering is of the final building. It's just kind of on a scrap of a napkin. And imagine if they were to make something that was a little shorter, looked more like the original McKinney Temple, maybe, with a steeple that kind of went up in sort of, a gradated way. So it wasn't just the one solid like we've seen. And imagine if it just kind of went like that, getting smaller and smaller. So the major proportion of the top was just a thinner steeple with a spire. I think something like that, I think the town would go, Yeah, that's not very intrusive if it kind of had that steeple like the original. So,
And I think the town council would say, thank you, church, for
yes,
helping us
thank
help
you.
you.
Yep,
Thank you.
exactly.
This we can,
Yep.
this probably will tide people over, but you got to give us something. And the church is refusing to do that.
Right. And people see this, I think. Okay, here's a good one, Landon. Do you want to read this one? And when there's a little dotted line above it, that's somebody answering that exact comment. So it's a comment and then it's a response on the thread.
The town has painted itself into a corner and painted itself in a bad light. The city has really painted itself into a corner here. The city forced the church in arbitration to agree to a smaller steeple and a smaller building. Then, when the church agreed, the city then published a newsletter promising to fight the church on the agreed dimensions, which were agreed to in arbitration. The city did the church dirty.
But someone pushes back.
Yeah, someone says this leaves out a lot of details. I understand your frustration, but please don't go spreading this like it's the whole story.
Isn't that interesting? And again, these are faithful LDS. They see what's really going on.
Yeah, the city did not push the church. The city laid out the rules. The city actually is accommodating the church with a larger than what they're going to have the largest church building in Fairview
Mm-hmm.
at this based on the mediation. The town people are saying, wait, that's still outside our zoning codes. We need to enforce our zoning codes. That's why the town was pushing back. The church voluntarily came down to these dimensions. Now people can say, well, they compromised. The result is though what people in the town are saying, well, that's like saying you were doing 100 miles an hour, you'll plead, that in a 60-mile-an-hour zone, and now you're saying, well, what if we only go 80 in this zone?
Exactly.
You're
It still
still
doesn't do
breaking
it.
the law, and the city, they're saying, city, why are you agreeing to this? That's not what our rules say. That's not what the zoning is for this area. So the people are saying it still doesn't conform with the zoning. So that nobody was forced to do anything. This was non-binding arbitration. Everyone agreed to these conditions. And so far, the town did exactly what the town agreed to in this arbitration and in this mediation. And the church has not, because the church was supposed to put forth something that was smaller.
Yeah. No, I think it's great. I just, I love to see people saying, hey, don't spread this. Find out more about it. This is not what happened, despite what you're hearing, because there's that knee-jerk reaction. The city did the church dirty, right? That
Yeah.
knee-jerk reaction. It's got to be the city, that terrible city. Look what they did to our church. But other people are like, slow down. Let's look at the facts. Nobody is a villain. And let's try to see what's really happening, because maybe we can help in some way. So I just noticed that the picture that I chose is that guy wearing a temple suit who painted himself into a corner.
Yes, yes.
I think that's
don't know
great.
why.
All right, let's go to the next one. Okay. This person said, I was originally on the side of the town because what they were originally asking for seemed fair, or at least in the very least, something the church could compromise on. Now it seems the city is pushing back just to push back. It is their right, but at the same time, why agree to anything if you're going to push back on the compromise? I guess the old adage remains true. Give somebody an inch and they'll take a mile. We were willing to compromise. We were willing to compromise out of good faith. And the town council took that to mean, they caved. Let's make them cave anymore. Even more. That attitude will probably come back to bite them once this reaches the courts. Again, this is misinformation. There was the non-binding arbitration. The church said, the council said, all right, we'll take this to the town, but it's out of our hands as far as being able to approve it. This is a democratic process. So no, it's not give an inch, take a mile. That's not what's happening here. But it's easy to tell yourself that and to have that righteous indignation, right? That the church is being somehow punished, or the town is bullying the church. So I don't know. What do you think? I love that sign right there. It says no to religious bullying. And that sign could be used by either side. Do you know what I mean? It's interesting.
Yeah, I'm a little confused by this because they said they were originally on the side of the town because
Right.
what they originally asked for seemed unfair.
Right.
But if you were originally on the side of the town, you will know that the town told the church exactly what the dimensions were that they would approve.
Yeah.
And the church came back and still was outside of those.
Right.
So why would the city agree to this? There's only one reason the city would have agreed to something that was larger than what they had proposed. And that is, and the mayor told us why, is because of the threat of a lawsuit
Yep.
would bankrupt the city.
Yep.
And they said we can't afford it, and therefore so the city didn't compromise. The city was forced to
Hmm.
accept this because of the threat of the lawsuit, and they couldn't afford to fight it. That's why so if you were originally on the side of the town, why would you have changed just because of this? You're in just the same situation you were before, only it's a smaller temple that they're arguing over than the bigger one, but it still doesn't conform to the town's requirements. So if you were with the town, you'd say, "Hey, the town told us what we needed to come back with, and we didn't come back with that." That's so. Why are you now saying that the city gave an inch? The problem is, or that the church gave an inch and they took a mile. The problem is the city gave an inch. The city
Yeah.
said, "We'll let you build it higher," and the town said, "No, we don't like this. This is not what we agreed to. We told them that they had to comply." And they're trying to force it back. And so they're coming back saying, "Look, we still don't want to pay this. And the town council said that in the meeting. We really don't have an option. This is the best option we have to approve." So, but they went back to the church and they're saying again behind the scenes, "Help us help you get this where it can pass. Do something to help it get passed, church." You saw the reaction. It is a democratic process. The mayor and the mayor pro temp and even the town council voting to approve the outline, they still haven't seen what it has. They're still lighting to be. There's a lot of things that can
There's a
still
lot of
be
issues.
decided here that weren't in. This is a very generic thing, and so there is room. The church could come back. The church said up to 120 feet. The church could come back with a 70-foot spire and not change the footprint at all, change it to 70 feet, and the town would have to
Yeah.
do this. All of this would be avoided. And that's what they're saying. Hey, if you just help us out a little bit here, it'll pretty much assure this will go through. But you guys are not willing to do that. So I don't see where you could say you were on the town side to begin with. The church came back and didn't comply with what the town told them. And now you're saying, well, we gave some. You did give some. But again, you came down to 80 miles an hour in a 60-mile-an-hour zone. And now you want the city to just accept it. And the fact that the city's even considering saying, well, you can go 80 miles an hour in this zone and nobody else can, is telling a lot. That
Yep.
is the religious
Their hand
privilege
is
that we
forced.
talked about. Only the church can go 80 miles an hour in this zone. Everyone else has to come down to the 60.
Yep. No, I agree with you. It reminds me of our episode we did on Nauvoo, the town of Nauvoo, where they are building a visitor center. And that's exactly it. They threatened the town. They're going to sue the town. And when it went to the final vote with the city council, they were all like, well, we have to. We're being bullied. And one person flat out said, we're being bullied. So they had to go along. Their hand was being forced. And they said it out loud.
In Nauvoo, 3 of the 6 town council people were LDS, including the
Yeah.
mayor. And
Yep.
they were feeling bullied and pressured.
Yep. They said, we don't want to do this.
None of the
But
LDS
we have
people
to.
said we're being pressured, but all the
Yeah.
non-LDS members of the council said, "I don't want to approve it, but I have no choice because we're going to be sued." And that is exactly what probably would have played out here if the church
Mhm.
would have presented it. Is the town council would have said, "We don't like this, we're not in favor of it, but we're going to approve it because we have no other option." That, if you want to see how this would have played out, watch that. We did an episode on the
Mhm.
Nauvoo Visitor Center, and watch that town council and see how just because you vote for it doesn't mean you like it. And that's what the town council is saying here. We still don't
Exactly.
like it. We're doing it because we have to. But boy, it would go a long way, church, if you made a few little revisions because you saw the town's reaction.
Yep.
And you could
That's it.
solve a lot of things, but it's all in your hands. The town council cannot, and the town council should not be forced to be the cheerleader to get this through for the church.
Right.
That's not their job. Their
Yep.
job is to mediate this and to work through it, and that's what they're trying to do. Unfortunately, the town has to do everything in the open
Yeah.
while the church sits behind closed doors and goes, da, 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 well, let's tell them this, let's tell them that, let's tell them we're not going to sue them when we will sue them if they don't do that. The town council has to say all that in open meetings.
Exactly. Yep. They have parameters they have to follow. Case in point would be the newspaper article back on the 13th of January when they did not submit their application. I'm talking about the church not submitting it. And they told the newspaper, oh, we will. We're just, making sure all the, T's are crossed, I's are dot. But behind the scenes, they had already delivered a letter saying this is not going well and it looks like it's headed to a lawsuit. So you're right. Transparency is a huge issue. All right, let's move on. Let's forge ahead. We have so many of these to get through. All right, here's a good one. Let's see. Is it your turn to read? I think so.
Yeah, saw the same thing in Vegas. Residents complained and complained, eventually settling on 3 or 4 main concerns. The church compromised on those concerns, yet the opposition only grew louder. They would say it's too big, but never say what size would be small enough. They said it's too tall, but never said what height they would accept. That's because their complaints and concerns are just the veneer to hide their bigotry.
Okay, put your earplugs in because Lana's going to go off on this one. Vegas. Oh my God.
These people clearly have no idea what happened in
They
Las
don't
Vegas.
know. I know.
So let's look at this. If you watched anything from our thing on Vegas, what happened in Vegas is the citizens did not even get their concerns heard. There was no format for them. The town meeting that they held, because let's go back and know that prior to this being announced, the town changed the zoning in this area to allow for the temple before the citizens even knew they were making a change to the code that would then allow this to happen. Up until
And that happens often.
the code would not allow the temple to be built. You could only build a church on a 5-acre plot of land. You couldn't go bigger. The city council changed the code before the temple ever even asked for the plan,
CUP
or
or
submitted
the
the
plan.
plan. But we know going back that the law firm representing the church, and it's not alleged that they made donations. They
Right.
made $10,000 donations to 6 of the 7
Right.
city,
Yeah.
council members.
Yeah.
And then
That
the
is
code
true.
got
The
changed.
alleged part
That
is
is true.
Yeah.
The alleged part
That
is
had an impact.
that it
on
had an
changing
impact.
things.
And
Yeah, that's
anyone
alleged.
who wants to say that that had no impact because the city council went on a tour to one of the members, the lead member whose area this was in, went on a tour to St. George to see the same temple design in St. George, that the church took them up there. The church took them on a temple inside the Las Vegas temple, took them on a tour. The church had full access to the city council members during the entire process. The citizens group did not. Even the open meeting was you have to submit your questions online. We're going to do it online, and you can submit your questions online, and they get to pick what questions they were going to answer. And of course, they were asked, people sent in questions. How does the campaign donation to you guys affect your decision? Of course, that one was ignored and wasn't asked because they knew that if it was an open meeting, that they'd be asked that question. That's why they closed it.
That's right. And they hired a lobbyist, the citizens did, to try to break through. And as I understand, it was incredibly frustrating. The lobbyist was like, I have not seen anything like that. There was no avenue to approach the council members to talk about this. It's too big, it's too tall. They could never express anything in this process.
And we also saw in Vegas, very similar to Fairview, in Vegas is involved in a very large lawsuit right now over a casino development, I believe, that's costing the city tens of millions of dollars. And the city specifically said during the meeting that we cannot afford another lawsuit like this.
Yeah, we have that on tape.
And therefore, we're going to approve it. Again, the same tactic. We're threatening a lawsuit, and therefore the city said, look, we can't afford the lawsuit. The church has already promised that if the citizens fight, that they will join us on the lawsuit, meaning the church will pay for the lawsuit for the city, and therefore we're going to vote for this. It doesn't matter that this was 212-foot building, and to say that the church made no compromises here. The church lowered the steeple at the very last minute. And why? You know, they made it look like a compromise. It was all
Oh my
dramatic. They
gosh.
got on the phone, Salt Lake, can we lower it a few feet? They were lowering it because it was so high that they had to put a FAA light on top of it,
Yeah.
a red beacon, and the church didn't want a red beacon on top of their temple. So they lowered it a few feet so it didn't need the beacon and then said that was a compromise.
Yeah.
The bottom line is that it is still the same building with just a little bit lower steeple, which is all the Fairview's asking. Keep the same building outline, just
Right.
lower the
Lowered a
steeple.
little bit.
They didn't, but this was a 200 and something foot in a residential area. This thing is massive. This towers way over Fairview, and this was in a rural development community and a dark sky area. And the church said, "Oh, we'll comply with your lighting we'll turn off the lights at like 11 o'clock at night and turn them back on at 5 in the morning." But they're
Yeah.
still lighting it bright. They didn't do anything that the neighbors asked for here.
No.
They
And
had
there's a lawsuit. There's a lawsuit from the neighbors, and we'll report on that. But we do have episodes on the Vegas temple. It was a very interesting scenario. But that last line, a veneer to hide their bigotry. We hear this over and over. That is not the case. That is not the case at all. There is no bigotry. And you know what's really sad about this Lone Mountain one? They have that gorgeous Lone Mountain, right?
Yeah.
It's just beautiful. It's this feature, you know, in this area. They have this wonderful mountain and the temple right there in the middle of it. I mean, why? I'm like,
lit
why
up
you gotta do that? Why you
instead of a
gotta
dark
find
mountain outline
yeah,
with the moon above it, you're going to have a big white
yeah.
building background against it.
Why? Why do you find these natural, wonderful, beautiful areas and stick a temple right in front of it? I just don't understand it. All right, we need to go on. We're gonna be doing this all day. Oh, okay, here's a good one. This type of thing always confuses me. If they decided to build a Buddhist temple in my neighborhood, all I'd want to know is if it'll be pretty and increase my property values. LOL. Pretty obvious that the adversary is involved here. So, number one, I don't believe probably that is true. If they were going to build a giant temple next to this person's house, a Buddhist temple, I guarantee they would want to know the same kind of details and have the same kind of questions that the Fairview Township does, that Lone Mountain does, that Cody did. They would want to know. And then to just default to it's the adversary. And there were lots of comments like that. You know, it's got to be the adversary who's trying to stop God's work. It's not the adversary. I would say the LDS Church is stopping the work because all they have to do is meet the codes and they could have already been building that temple.
Well, we've said it before that Mormon God is a real estate God,
Yes,
and
we
you
have
can
said
see
that.
that the members are simply saying, as long as it increases my house value, what do I care? And then they put LOL, but that's a tongue-in-cheek laugh.
Yeah.
Oh, as long as it makes my house value go up, not, oh, I'd love to have them as a neighbor in my, you know, what happens if it didn't increase your house value? What if building a Buddhist temple in your backyard decreased your house value? Then would you fight it? Of course you would. You'd say, I just lost $50,000 because they
Right.
bought this, because they built this thing in my backyard. So other people have every right to say, well, you're blocking my view. So I'm going to complain that my view is more important than my value of my house. I value my view more than I value my house. Other people value things more than just property value.
Yep.
And the second thing is, let's say they did build one in a Buddhist temple and it doubled the value of your house. Guess what that means? It's going to double the amount of property tax that you
Yep.
get to pay to live in your house. And so now them building this temple next to your house just cost you what, $2,000-$3,000 a year
Yep.
to live in the same house you've always lived in because they got to do that? To say that it increases someone's property value is not a positive thing if your intent is to live in that house for a long time and raise your family and raise your kids. So you can't just put that as the overriding concern and say, well, it raises my property value. It only raises it if you sell your house and move to somewhere that it's not at.
Yeah, and that does seem to be something they say. This will increase your values, but you're right. It will increase your tax burden. And if you happen to live in Heber around the temple site, it will increase you having to pay for flood insurance because that water table and all the water they're going to be pumping out of that site on a daily basis, you're going to have to get some insurance.
And in Heber, it will actually lower the property value because you have all of those $1 million homes who built on that in that area. to have a natural view of a mountain valley, and now they have a natural view of a giant white building.
Right. Massive. And it will have blinking lights on top of that Moroni
Mhm.
or tower because it's right in the flight plan of the airport. We haven't talked about Heber for a while, but that plan is really interesting. And there's probably going to be some updates in the next little while. So, all right, let's continue. Here we go. I think it's Landon's turn to read. Okay.
I live in an area that is heavily Lutheran. They pushed back against our new stake center, and they push back even more so against a mosque. It's always the same concerns, which are a thin veil for religious bigotry.
Mm-hmm.
This is kind of interesting. It's the religious people complaining about the other religious people being bigots. We saw this over and over in these comments. Well, that's because they're Lutheran. That's because they're Mormon. Come live in Utah. The Mormon Church can build whatever they want, wherever they want.
Yep.
The church has even told, we've talked to property developers who have told us, I tried to get something on a property and I could not get it through the town council. When the church came and wanted to buy the property, I said, you won't be able to get they wanted to build, I think it wasn't a church building. They wanted to develop it somehow. And they said, you won't be able to get that through. And they said, oh, don't worry, we'll get it through. There's
Yeah.
no problem getting this through the town council with us.
Out in Utah.
And so how does that work? The guy has to sell it at a lower value because he can't build the same thing that the church wants to build on it, but the church has all the insiders in city government and we'll get it pushed through and we'll be able to build it. So the guy, how does that protect this guy's property by letting a church build something that others won't? And in this case, it wasn't residential. It was, we can get the zoning changed because all the people on the city council are LDS, and we'll just talk to them and let them know how important this is, and they'll make the change for us. And that's what you're up against. So to say that, and we saw McKinney, the town right next door, the temple's going to be called the McKinney Temple, even though it's being built in Fairview. A mosque did ask to be built, and they had a limit on building size that you couldn't have more than 30,000 square foot or something like that.
Yeah,
and they
it
were
was too
asking
big.
for something like 45,000 square foot, and they said, no, you can't do that. And so the mosque said, well, we might have to break it into 3 smaller buildings in order to make this work to comply with your codes. They didn't get up and say, oh, you're religious bigotry, you're hateful. They said, we're going to show the town what kind of people we are, and we're going to work within the town and show them what kind of religious people we are. Whereas the church says, we're going to show you what kind of religious people we are. We're a church full of lawyers, and we're going to sue you.
Yep, that's it. And I will point out that, a thin veil for religious bigotry. In that same site in Fairview, there have been other buildings that have tried to come in that didn't meet the code, different kinds of buildings. And they've said no to those too. It's not religious bigotry. No matter how awesome that makes you feel to say that, that's not what's happening.
And to have religious groups complaining about other religious groups and then say, oh, we should have this religious law where religions get carte blanche. Do you see a problem there? If any religion can build whatever it wants and all the other religious people are going to complain that religion got more than they got, you've just opened it up for religious wars, which is an argument exactly for what the city's arguing is we want everyone to have to build to the same code. And then we don't have this argument of this religion got this, that religion got this, and you're allowing them something you're not allowing us. If everyone has to comply with the same code, you don't get this problem. That's what government's there for. But using this RLUIPA, you've just given religion carte blanche to do whatever they want. And now you're going to have religions yelling at each other, calling each other bigots when they don't approve their particular buildings.
Yep, and try to outbuild each other.
And try to outbuild each other.
Ramyumptum, Tower of Babel, right? There we go. All right, let's forge ahead. I think we have so many comments to get through. All right, says this seems like a lose-lose situation. If the church loses, then they lose. If they win, then they look like a bully. Is it really that big of a deal that the church build a temple in that specific location? I'm sure there's somewhere nearby that the church could build a temple without having to go through all this drama. What a novel idea, right? There's a commercial zone. They could easily build there. There's lots of different options that the church has to get this build. And this person seems to see that and also seems to recognize that even if they win, they look like a bully.
And the mayor said, come over to this side of town, our commercial side, and you could build it right now. we would approve this. And you're right. You don't even have to move location. You just have to change the height
Hmm.
of the steeple at this
Yeah.
point, and then you'd get it right through. That's what they were trying to tell you. Hey, let's avoid all this drama. Just drop the steeple to what we told you, and we'll get this. This should go through without a
Yep.
problem. But no one wants to listen.
No one
They'd
wants to
rather.
listen.
It's a lose-lose for everybody at this
It
point. A
is.
win-win is what the town was trying to do. Lower it a little bit. You get it. We don't have to fight. Everyone sees you compromising. They saw us negotiate. Everyone negotiate in good faith. This is what you do when you're in legal things: is you throw a bone by saying, "Hey, still a problem. Think about this." You're throwing a bone, helping the other side out, but
Hmm.
the church isn't throwing a bone back.
Mm-mm.
So that's
No,
where we're at.
not at all. But I like that comment because the person definitely saw that the end result, no matter what happens, is going to be bad. And of course, the real person who's suffering here are the people who need their work done in the temple. They are waiting. They are waiting. We need to get that built. All right. What about this one, Landon?
You're probably not wrong about the lose-lose, but at this point, from the PR statement, it seems the church definitely views this not just a McKinney Temple thing, but more a rights issue around religious liberty. If they back down here, then it could signal to other towns in the future that they can make a big stink to prevent temples from being built in their communities. And honestly, being perceived as a bully doesn't matter here. There appears to already be enough animosity and resistance to the church that they will dislike it no matter what. At this point, the fight is more about protecting religious freedom and advocating for the saints in that area. Clearly, there is a critical mass of saints to justify the temple.
Is there, though?
Well, the issue here is, again, this is not about religious freedom because the church has no one is arguing that the church does not have a right to build
Right.
their temple and to build it on this site. The only argument is do you have to conform with the zoning codes of the town in which you are building? And if they say, well, they're going to set a precedent, we've already seen they set a precedent in California where they lowered it and complied. They set a precedent in Paris, France, where they complied with all of the zoning codes that were required of them. We see it in what is it, Birmingham, England, with the temple, where they're
Mm-hmm.
conforming with and they're
Yeah.
listening to the city because they don't have this religious uh, Rupa law, which
Right.
again is not religious freedom; it's religious privilege. It's saying
Mhm.
so the church is arguing, well, if we give in here, we can't build a temple as big as we want in any community we want.
Yep. They'll raise a stink.
They'll
It says.
raise a
They'll raise a
stink.
stink. You
Well,
mean
the town
protect
has
our
every right.
zoning?
Yeah,
Oh, we're both yelling. You
yeah,
mean protect your zoning laws?
yeah. Let's step back and look at it on the other foot. Let's say that the town says, okay, we're going to let you build a steeple height of 120 feet. Let's
Mhm.
say that the town, that this goes through. The next church that wants to build a
Yep.
250-foot steeple, the town just set the precedence that no, we
Yep.
can't say no to a 250-foot because we allowed them to build higher than what we allowed. So why can't we allow the Lutheran church to build 210 now? You let the Mormons do it. You know, they're pointing and saying we let the Mormons do 68. Now they want 120. So they're saying there's got to be a point where we draw the line
Right.
and say this is getting out of hand. We're just going to limit everybody to this height. That is the fair thing to do.
Yes.
That is the right thing to do. What keeps a person now? We heard about the guy who built a 35-foot roof in it. The house came in with the trusses built the wrong size,
Yes.
and he had to spend tens of thousands of dollars to fix it because he was
A regular citizen,
a
not
regular
a religion.
citizen
Yeah,
because he
just a
was 2
person.
feet over the height requirement. Well, all that guy has to do now is go back and say, I have a religious preference that I have to have 35-foot ceilings in my home in order to say a prayer to my God.
Right.
And
Right.
he could argue religious
He could.
use, and RLUIPA allows for that. It allows for individuals to, you could put your garage right next to the fence line and say, I need this garage in order to pray to God. I pray in my garage, and you don't have to have the separation that you have to have. You can say RLUIPA allows me to.
Yeah.
You just invalidated all of their religion, all of their zoning codes by simply all you have to do is give a religious purpose of why you're building a building there, or why you're violating the zoning code. And as the church has argued, the city doesn't get to decide whether it's an adequate religious. The church is arguing the people saying they're a church gets to define what they're religious. That's
Exactly.
why they're trying to say that building high steeples is part of their doctrine, is because they're saying we get to define what's our doctrine, not you. So this opens up the city to anything. And that's why the city's pushing back. The city is saying it cannot be a free for all where every religion gets everything they want, or there shouldn't even be a process for applying for a religious
There
building. Anyone
basically
should
won't
just be
be.
able to come in and build whatever they
Yeah.
want, and there should be no input from the city at all. Let's just avoid
Yeah.
the whole process if that's what RLUIPA allows.
Yeah, and I don't think a lot of people realize RLUIPA is individuals too. So you could have a neighbor that says, I need to build a 300-foot gazebo. That's how I climb to the heavens and worship my God. It's my religious right. And that could happen. People don't realize that. I like your example of not putting sprinklers in a building. Like the church says, we believe in being cleansed by fire. So if it burns down, that's our right. And we don't want to follow the codes of putting sprinklers into the building. Would that fly? I mean, there's all kinds of questions that you could ask. And I think it's interesting. This is a picture of Cody right here, Relocate the Temple, from their citizens group, Preserve Our Cody's Neighborhood. But we did hear on a recorded stake meeting with some lawyers from the church, they said, if we give a foot in Cody, if we give 10 feet in Vegas, pretty soon we'll be building 30 feet temples. So they are pitching that kind of propaganda, and that is not realistic. All churches have the right to present a CUP, to work with the town, and end up with something that works and that fits within those parameters. So to say that, we're going to end up with 30 feet temples, that is not realistic. And the same lawyer said, and we have a little short of this recording put out on our Mormonish YouTube channel. The same lawyer said, I have other real estate concerns that I litigate for. Gosh, I wish I had RLUIPA for those. It's like a get out of jail free card. I wish I could use this to get anything I wanted in my other cases, is what he implied. So,
and again, that's deceitful, because you would only be limiting the height of the temples to whatever the zoning code is in the area you chose.
Right.
So yes, you would be limited in the height you could build in a residential zone, which is the purpose of residential zoning codes.
Exactly.
To keep it low. But you could go into a commercial district and you can build it as tall as is allowed in the commercial district. So you wouldn't be limited. You might be limited in the areas in which you could build a taller temple, but you wouldn't be limited in being able to build a temple. You would just have to build it in a commercial or an industrial zone.
Right. But the question he was answering was posed by someone at the stake level that said, I don't know what to tell people here in Fairview. Why does it have to be so big? And that was the answer. The lawyer was scaring the stake leadership too, to explain to them, we cannot budge. Go back and tell your people. And that's misinformation. All right, let's move on. In a magical land, I hope they win the case, donate the damages back to the town, then still move the temple somewhere else. So that's nice. Somebody said that. Then somebody else replied and said, in my magical land, the church would win the case, get its damages, and then sell the land to be a sewage plant. Not very Christ-like, but one can hope, right? This is your community. Why would you want, it's just so crazy that it shows how divisive it is, right? Why would you want this for your neighbors in this tight-knit community of only 11,000 people?
Again, I know they're just trying to make a funny,
right.
Yeah, these people deserve a sewer plant in their backyard.
We're trying to protect their rights.
Is a sewage plant would not be allowed on this zone. No. If the church win, they couldn't build it because it's not zoned for it, which is the exact same reason that they can't put a church there. And then to say, that they sell the land, that the other concern with the church is there is no sewer in this area. They have to either tie into a sewage line from another city, or they have to build a big field for the sewage to be in. So
Infrastructure. It's a big
that
deal.
is actually one of the concerns for the neighbors is there is no sewage available on this property. You'd have to tie into another city in order to do it. And has that been worked out? That was some of the questions that were asked. But I like the tagline, not very Christ-like, but one can hope. They seem to. This is why we want to give churches special permissions because of these Christ-like attitudes that they bring to the community.
Oh, yeah.
If we can't do what we want, burn everybody else.
That's right. Burn it down. Oh, my goodness. Interesting. Okay, let's read the next one. I think it's your turn.
I've seen some comments from members from Texas and from the area about the importance of this temple to them. Apparently, the next nearest one, Dallas, is always packed and incredibly difficult to get into because it serves so many people. A second temple is needed, at least in the area. Why McKinney specifically instead of Dallas proper or some small town next to Dallas, I do not know.
Yeah. And of course, this graphic, people send this to me all the time. And this is where you can sign up to do a session at the Dallas Temple, which is always packed and incredibly difficult to get into. So this was just a regular weekday. And it's showing you, this was in the evening before that day, how many seats were available in each of these sessions: 36, 37, 43, 26. People push back on this and say, oh, no, but it fills up, by the next morning, or walk-ins. Are you really trying to tell me that you're going to have that many people walking in? I've had so many people tell me that no, it's not full. I think the location is what's the problem with the Dallas Temple. It's not convenient to where a lot of the LDS members live. And again, they have the right to build a temple wherever they want, as long as it follows the zoning in that area. So, but how funny to say, why don't you build it in some other small town? It was supposed to go in Prosper. Now it's moved over to Fairview. So anyway, but that's an argument. We really, really need it. And I mean, whether the Dallas Temple is packed or not, they still have the right to build a temple, of course.
Well, and you can make the argument that it fills up with walk-ins at the last minute.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with that argument is if that's true and all the sessions are filling up with walk-ins, people would then be making sure they got a reservation so they didn't get stuck.
Good
and
point.
Reservations would be you wouldn't have 29 empty seats. People would be actually going in and saying, oh, last time I went, I got bumped out of 2 sessions because I didn't have a reservation. I'm going to get a reservation this time. You're not seeing that. So we know it's not being full. But that said, like you said, we don't care. If they want to build one more convenient for people, fine. Just build it within the codes. That's all anyone's asking. We don't care where you build a temple. We don't want you not to have a temple. Yep. Just build it according to the codes that the city's asking. That's what our problem is here, is that the towns have to spend millions of dollars to fight you because you don't come in with something that meets their ordinances in the first place. And then you try to ram it down their throat through legal bullying.
Yeah, that's true. And it can be empty, but you can still build it, like Scientology, right? Yeah. They have all kinds of empty buildings all over the place. The education centers that really nothing happens in, according to some documentaries that I've watched, and they're almost completely empty. Totally your right to do that. So, all right, let's go to the next one. I think it's my turn. Okay. NIMBYism, that's not in my backyard, ism, is the worst. I suspect that they're the type of town that staunchly refuses to build any housing, no matter how reasonable. Okay, that's what somebody's saying. Somebody pushed back and said, I thought so too, but apparently they've been building high-density residential units and a mall. Then they have plans to build 240 acres of even more retail, commercial, and multifamily housing. In other words, they're a normal town, meeting their citizens' needs by building housing. And someone else says, even worse is Fairview approved the Methodists to have a digital display tower at 154 feet. It's not considered NIMBYism. It's religious discriminatory NIMBYism. Now, we could do a whole nother hour on the bell tower. It's very strange, though, because I've seen this comment recently, a digital display tower. So somewhere they're getting this information. This is not what it was. This was back in 2006. Here's a picture of the bell tower in the lower portion of the slide that was presented to the town council. We have a whole episode on this called We Need More Bell Tower. And in very simple terms, the city council did approve it. They're like, sure, build it. But we got to send it back down through the process to planning and zoning for, height, hammer that out, hammer out the decibel of the bills. Those things need to be still discussed. And then you'll end up with a signed CUP with all those final, changes, whatever needs to happen, and everybody's signed off on. That document doesn't exist. So while the town council said, sure, build it, we approve it in their minutes, it never went through the final process. It was never built. I've gleaned from comments, a lot of faithful LDS think that a 154 tall tower is somewhere there in Fairview, not built. The picture above is the amended plan that was built, and this was something like 10 years after the fact, right? 2015 or something like that. Much shorter, not a digital display, but they do use this all the time. The precedent of the 154-foot bell tower, never built, approved, but never finalized with a signed, dated CUP with actual dimensions, actual height, actual decibels of the bell. So to me, that doesn't mean anything, and it's not a precedence, but they bring this up a lot. But the digital thing is interesting. It makes me think somebody's out there putting out information talking about a digital display.
Yeah, someone is telling church members about a digital display tower. There was no display on it. It was a bell tower.
It was a bell tower with a bell, which is why they had to, the council said, we need to discuss the decibel. How far will you be able to hear this ringing? What impact will it have? And we'll let the planning and zoning discuss this before the final signatures and plans are approved. That doesn't exist.
And it's a completely different structure. As you can see, it wasn't attached to the building.
Exactly.
It was a standalone tower. So much like a cell phone tower or something like that. But the town, this was 20 years ago.
Exactly. 20 years ago.
20 years ago. And the town council said, we don't have a problem with the height. It's also on like a 19-acre compound. So it's on a much, much larger area than what the church is building on. But the bottom line is they sent it back and said the final height and sound is to be agreed upon with the Planning and Zoning Commission. And then the church never came back and finalized the plan. So it was never built. And they came back 10 years later and built this steeple that's only like 48 feet tall or something.
Yeah, it's a very pretty building.
So the precedence is a 48-foot tower. This was never, it was approved by the city to go back to planning and zoning for final height decisions and everything. And the church came back once and went through some things and then never came back and agreed. So they don't have an approved plan for this.
Nope.
And so to use this as a precedent when something that was never built is hard pressed, and they're looking back 20 years. What do we go back to 1880 and see what, that they didn't have to put a fire sprinkler in their building in 1880,
Exactly.
I mean, what point do you say, hey, the town today gets to decide what the rules are today, not the town 20 years ago that agreed to something that never was built and never got completed and was never finalized through the process. So this NIMBYism thing, not in my backyard. Everyone wants to complain about NIMBYism when they're trying to get something built, but as soon as it's in their own backyard, they're all for NIMBYism. I
That's
mean,
right.
They
are
NIMBY.
NIMBY.
Had a highway built through my backyard. I know. I don't want that there.
Because it was a bird sanctuary for 20 years.
Bird sanctuary,
and
now
suddenly it's a freeway.
Freeway. So we all know, but the bottom line is there's a process that it goes through. They went through the process and the road got approved and the road's now in my backyard. There's a process here. They went through it. It didn't get approved. So that's how it goes. Sometimes it gets approved. Sometimes it doesn't. In this case, it wasn't approved. But even the road, they had to make a lot of concessions, sound walls. Where are you putting sound walls? You got to put berms here. You got to use a certain kind of asphalt that will reduce the noise. There's requirements that the city still puts on the builder. He doesn't get carte blanche. I can just build the road any way I want. And that's the same thing here. Okay, we're saying it's going to go in your backyard, but here's the requirements for the protection of the homeowner. Here's the limits we're going to put on it so that they can put it in your backyard and that the owner can still live with it. There has to be some give and take, and that's what the council's trying to do.
Yep, that's true. So if any of you ever have a discussion with a faithful member who brings up a digital bell tower, there's some misinformation out there. You can explain this. Never built and not digital. And maybe you can even show them this video.
Well, I think it was digital because I think it was a digital bell system, but it was not a display. There was no display on it.
Yeah. All right, let's move ahead. Okay, you can read this one.
They also didn't care about another church building, something comparable to what the temple originally planned to be. It's about not allowing the temple, not about what they think is
Oh,
okay.
okay.
The pushback is from the town council, not necessarily the residents. And then someone said, oh, it's definitely resident driven.
Yeah. This one made me mad because they're just basically saying, nope, they just don't like us and they don't want us to build anything. And that means you're not following at all what is happening. And, these residents are civic minded, they're wonderful people, and they're just trying to think of everyone in the town. The town council is also thinking of everyone in the town, LDS members included.
Well, when they said they didn't care about another church building, I'm guessing they're talking about the bell tower again.
Yeah, I think they're
Because
bringing up the bell tower. Yeah, because the LDS church already had the LDS. They already have the largest religious building in town in their stake center, 68 feet. They already have that.
And again, why do you have hearings and that if the bell tower wasn't, if the residents didn't complain about the bell tower because it's on a 19 acre and there's only a couple residents that back up against it. That's why you have cups is we can issue special, but we have to see the circumstances, see how it affects the neighbors, see what the neighbors think. If the neighbors are for it, then great. Same thing here in Utah. All the neighbors around an LDS temple, because it's 80% LDS, say, oh, we're for the temple.
Yeah.
But in some place that isn't, it may not be. And that's okay because to the residents, the one is important. To the other resident that's not a member, it's not an important building. It's an obstruction. So that's why you have town councils. That's why you have hearings. And just because it's okay in one place doesn't mean it's okay in another. And if the residents, that's one of the things we do here on Mormonish. If the temple's getting built and nobody complains about it, we don't say a word. It's when the town calls and says, we don't like this and we're trying to
what's happening,
fight it, that we say, okay, we can give you some information that'll help you. But if they ever tell us, we just don't want a Mormon church in our neighborhood, we say, well, that's not a reason to fight it.
Yeah, we would not deal with people like that.
What are they doing that violates your codes? If they're not violating your codes, then they have every right to build it, and we're not going to say anything.
Yep. And that's why it's deja vu. Every time you read an article in the paper, like Bakersfield, that I went over on the newscast, the article is deja vu for all the towns. We would love to have a temple here. We are not saying, or just please follow the codes. It's just, we hear the same thing over and over and over from all these towns. And, when you say that you think all of the Utah residents, the members are on board with the temple, I don't know. Sometimes I looked at the Smithfield temple, which is massive. And there's a tiny little neighborhood right by it. I mean, I'm talking, this temple is, and the houses are, in theory, maybe they're okay with it, but they have no view anymore. All they see is this giant lit building. Maybe they do love it, but I don't know. I think maybe
that's what I'm
inside
saying
they're like,
the members are going to support it. And since 80% of them, it's 80% LDS, they're going to get what they want.
Right, but I'm saying maybe even the members in their heart of hearts are like,
oh yeah,
I wish I wasn't looking at a lit up brick wall now. I mean, just in my heart, right? I just wonder.
I've got to support it to show my faith, but I really don't want it. But I can't say anything.
That's what I wonder. So, all right, well, let's go to the next one. All right. I love this one. This is great. I wonder if it's worth building it in Fairview or moving it to Allen or McKinney proper. It would still, I know we should move it to McKinney. Wouldn't that be great? The mayor has come out with a gushing statement saying it's the most beautiful thing. So McKinney would be wonderful. It would still serve members from all over Dallas and clear past Denison anyway. The residents seem to not put up a big fuss for the new Fairview town center, with a Whole Foods, a theater, apartments, Macy's, Dillard's, JCPenney's built from 2017-24. Maybe those apartments and businesses were short enough for them. The residents were also happy about Sloan Corners, which is planned to have 100,000 square feet of retail space and 44 million square feet of office space. Maybe those buildings would be short enough for them. I initially thought favored the town until I read about the other huge developments that Fairview was allowing, and the mayor is posing, smiling at the groundbreaking. They're doing everything, expanding roads to make way for businesses, retail, high density housing, the works. And what zone are they doing all of this in, Landon?
The commercial zones.
The commercial zone where you can do anything. You could put the temple right there next to Dillard's. That would be amazing. You could go shopping right afterwards. Yeah, this person doesn't quite get it. A town, of course, can expand. The mayor should be standing in front of a new development that went through the process of the planning and zoning and the town council in the correct area with the correct zoning. So yeah, I thought this was a really interesting comment.
Yeah, very
especially when it said, are these short enough for you? They don't have to be short. They're being built in a zone where they can be huge.
And the mayor invited them to move the temple to this area right here. They
Yep.
could build that temple right around this same development area, and the mayor would be out there smiling and cutting the ribbon with them right now.
Yep.
The problem is they have a residential area that they want to keep it country. They zoned it specifically for housing units of a certain size, a certain acreage, and they're saying that's what we should stick with in these areas. And they allow for churches, they allow for schools. They're just saying they have to stay within the limits of that specific zoning requirement. That's the thing people don't seem to understand. There are different zoning areas for different types of activities. That as long as you stay within those, and churches are allowed in residential areas. The town simply saying
anywhere.
if you build in a residential area, you have to have a cup,
which is a conditional use permit.
Because you're going to exceed what is allowed, and that cup
Within
has to go through a process, and we're going to put the limits on what you can do in that cup. And that's what they've done. They've set the limits and said, this is what you can do. And the church says, well, that's not good enough. We need bigger, and we're going to fight you in court over it.
There you go. I will also point out that the mayor's probably smiling because all of these businesses will be paying taxes to the town. The temple will not be paying any taxes at all. So there's a big difference there.
Yep, this will provide jobs. The temple will only provide jobs during the time it's being constructed because no one gets paid in the temple. And since it's right on the border of Allen, there's no real Allen and McKinney. Most of the business will go to those towns that don't have to approve this. They're not even going to call it the Fairview Temple. They're going to call it the McKinney Temple for a town that it's not even in. So they, but that being said, I don't think that factors in at all to the mayor's decision.
No, not at all. No, we should state that. And I just made that kind of facetiously that the temple does not pay taxes.
Yeah.
And are you trying to say, Landon, that doing this is not a job?
It's not a paid job. It's an important job. I know
okay.
Anyone who's gone to the temple that you won't find your way through that massive 40,000-foot temple unless somebody waves their hand and tells you which way to go.
It's important. You can get lost in the bowels of the temple. It happened to me once. All right. Go ahead, Landon.
I am not a member of your church, so please forgive me for my ignorance, but I wonder why the church wouldn't just build a 65-foot temple. I come from the Orthodox Church, and we also build massive temples. Just look at Hagia Sophia. But if a zoning board said, we'd like you to limit it to 6 stories, we would most likely be fine with that. It's the thing that happens inside the temple that would matter. Baptism, the seal of the Holy Spirit, communion, instead of the building dimensions. Is there some dogma or doctrine in the LDS Church that makes this height more necessary? If there isn't, why wouldn't they simply go with 65 feet?
Well, it's a good question from somebody who's not in the church, right? That's exactly right. And he stated what many church officials, the prophet himself, Elder Bednar, had said, it's what happens inside. So looking from the outside in, people do wonder this. Why not?
Yeah. And I'm guessing that this building here from the Orthodox Church is not built in a Texas residential area.
No, it's more of a destination kind of a building, and the church does build destination temples too, like Rome, and they're only open a couple hours a week because people don't go, but it's a destination. All right, so interesting comment. This is kind of what happened in Cody. There was a negotiation to limit the lighting and reduce the tower height, but the neighborhood group decided to sue after the compromise, and as far as I understand it, ended up nullifying all the negotiated reductions. That is complete misinformation. And again, we have so many episodes on Cody. There was no negotiation. There was absolutely no concession because of the confusion and the inside man of the alleged inside man of the city planner. The temple sailed right through, and they didn't even understand that they were actually voting for it without any concession. And that is why the neighborhood group, their suit, which is against the city, saying this was improperly passed, is going to be heard by the Wyoming State Court on February 11th. So this is happening in towns all over. But again, misinformation here. They think that, people are just suing and they're not getting what they want, and that is not what happens. It's a legal process.
Never negotiated in Cody.
Yeah, nothing.
The steeple was always 110 foot.
And it is
the
now.
First time it went to a meeting, the town council thought they were voting to approve the temple without the steeple height,
which they would discuss
approved.
Later. Yeah.
They would discuss that later. And then the LDS town, after the vote, the LDS town city planner told them, no, you approved it. We know they submitted a different plan, but then they withdrew that plan. So you really were voting on the original plan, and therefore it passes. And he got it through, and the judge ruled, yeah, that's what you voted on, because they withdrew the plan. But the city planner, who was LDS, told them that they were, and it was clear from all of the writing that the council had no idea that they were approving a steeple height. They thought that was up for future discussion, and the judge ruled no, it was passed long before the city
even knew the city itself, and there were many other meetings and votes.
They kept having meetings because they thought it hadn't been approved.
Right, and that's why it's going to the Supreme Court, and that's
so
why
now it's going to the Supreme Court to ask, hey, can you really? Because the town said we didn't have a majority of the people here voting, it doesn't pass, and they continued the process. The church sued and said it does pass because the city, a majority of the people that were there voted for it, and so that's why you have it. But the city has never limited the lighting. They have
no negotiation.
The church has never negotiated at all in Cody. And they didn't think they had to, because they had a city planner who lost his job over this. He resigned over it, and now is on a church LDS mission at this point. So
yeah, it's an interesting scenario. No, I know it makes me think about Bakersfield. Their town manager is a stake president, as I understand it. So, I mean, that's kind of, you just don't know, you don't know what's going on behind the scenes. It's interesting. All allegedly, of course. All right, let's read this next one. Is it your turn to read? I'm losing track.
I don't know. Honestly, I think heading to court would be a mistake. The church can find another spot to build the temple. Forcing the town to accept the temple is not going to foster good feelings. And then someone said, would you feel the same if the town didn't allow mosques or synagogues, that they should just go somewhere else? Well, apparently they do, because McKinney did reject a mosque after the mayor wrote a glowing thing about how Fairview should allow the LDS temple. The McKinney Town Council then voted down a mosque in their own city. This was after that. So, yes, apparently the McKinney people would say that. And we saw just recently in Utah here where a church wanted to offer the church that's already built, already exists. They want to authorize it as a warming center, which when the temperatures outside get below like 15 degrees Fahrenheit, it then becomes a warming center, and people who are homeless are allowed to come and stay there overnight. They're bussed in and then they're bussed out the next day. And the community went nuts and said, not my community. There will be no warming center in my community. We will not allow that church to be a warming center, which RLUIPA allows for. RLUIPA says you can't discriminate against. You can build food kitchens and other things in these areas, but and we checked, the people who were complaining were all LDS.
Yeah, we did check.
Not all, I shouldn't say, but
right. And this was in a predominantly LDS,
it's
very
a predominantly
conservative
LDS.
area. Yeah.
Yep. And they voted it down, and then the next town next to them voted it down. So you can say that, but the reality is that members of the LDS church do exactly the same thing when they don't like a proposal.
Yep, and that's a good point about RLUIPA, which everyone is using as their champion, their sword. RLUIPA will also let a soup kitchen or a homeless shelter go into a neighborhood using the same
Mhm.
law. So that's something to think about.
Yeah, if someone wants to build a soup kitchen next to your house, uh, if you support RLUIPA, you're saying go ahead, build a soup kitchen. I really
Mhm.
support that. I don't think a lot of people want to have a soup kitchen built next to their home, but RLUIPA says they can.
Yeah,
So I'm betting that if someone tried to build a soup kitchen next to your house, you would probably fight it.
I know it's a complex issue, that's for sure. All right, let's move on. This one says, I do support the temple. The question I have is this fight worthwhile for the particular location? The other new Dallas Fort Worth temple location is already under construction. Yeah, there are other temples that are being built that are not that far away. This one hasn't even started. And if it goes to litigation, it might, number one, take a lot of time. Litigation is slow. And number two, make the church look bad, even though Fairview is the one being unreasonable. Okay. There are a multitude of factors, but if another location with less resistance could be found, it might be better. Notice I said might. There are long-term religious rights issues and perhaps some other things. Ultimately, too many people on this sub want the church to sue, and punish Fairview. And quite frankly, as an attorney who deals with litigation, that is horribly myopic and short-sighted, and punishing Fairview is not very Christ-like. So there you go. He sees it because he's an attorney and he absolutely knows what all of this means and the process. Even though he does say that he, thinks Fairview is the one that's not being reasonable, he's basically saying, let's cut our losses, let's go. Let's not have the negative PR. Let's find another location and let's just do it. So, that's an attorney's point of view.
And again, we don't have to change the location. All we
No.
have to do, is conform to the requirements. And they've done it with many other temples conform with these requirements. And that's all they're saying. You could have the temple approved that it was supposed to be approved in April if they submitted in January.
Mm-hmm.
Had they just submitted with one that approved, they would be starting building in April. They'd have their building permit.
Yeah.
So
They
the
probably already
argument
be
that
starting.
Fairview is stopping them from exercise, it's the church not putting forth something that complies that is slowing the process down. And this man, as an attorney, realizes every attorney we've talked to has said the same thing. You do not want to go to court here.
Yeah.
Court is just going to slow everything down. It's going to cost huge amounts of money. Why would anyone want to go to court on this? Nobody should want to go to court here. And the town is trying not to go to court. That's the only reason they agreed to this compromise, was because they didn't want to go to court over it. But the church seems to be willing to
Yeah.
go to court at every turn.
They're
And
taking a
that's the
stand right
difference.
here. Yeah, I still feel something still may happen, but unfortunately, it could be like we saw in Nauvoo where they say, we had to,
Yeah.
I mean, when the pressure's so great, I don't know. We'll see what happens. All right. Okay, go ahead, Landon.
I feel like there's a factor in location selection you're both forgetting and also not personally privy to.
Ooh.
And then someone says, and are you going to say what that is? Or is your comment going to be unhelpfully vague? If it's the Lord you are referring to, then maybe you should take time this year as we cover the DNC to learn about far west Missouri. Obviously, there are factors I'm not privy to. However, many times I think the location is not as important to the Lord as the fact that we build a temple. If not in Fairview, then in Prosper or Plano or McKinney or Melissa or Wiley or Frisco. Would those places be more accommodating? Frisco and McKinney are big enough. The answer is probably, as they are less small town council throwing around their weight to feel important.
Well, obviously, this person doesn't know that it was announced by President Nelson in Prosper, but their zoning and codes are very locked down and it moved next door. Again, McKinney would be great because they have expressed that they love the temple and their mayor is behind it. So,
But
yes, LDS Church, move over to McKinney. It's just like a few feet away.
But McKinney's painted themselves into a corner, because if McKinney now allows the LDS temple to be built there
Oh, the
outside of the
mosque.
zoning laws, and they didn't allow the mosque, now
Yep,
McKinney's in trouble with the same thing. So
that's a
McKinney's
problem.
probably not a good place to go at this
Mm,
point. But I don't like the last statement that the town council throwing
yeah,
around their weight to feel
to feel
important.
important.
They're
Nope.
not throwing around their weight. They're telling you what is allowed. And
Yep.
it's the church throwing around their weight. They're the 1,000-pound gorilla in the room with all the money to sue. That's what's causing all the problem, is the church throwing around its weight, trying to override the town. The town's just saying we're trying to enforce our codes. And if you meet our codes, we'll approve it. If you move it into the commercial zone, we'll approve it. They've given the church many options, but the church is the 1,000-pound gorilla throwing the fit and has all the money and is threatening all the lawsuits, and they have been from day one. So I don't think that's fair to say. And but I like their point about DNC. Yeah, they
Yeah.
didn't build a temple in far west Missouri. They didn't build a temple in Independence. The Lord announced them, and they never got built.
Never built.
Why? There's a lot of reasons why, but
Persecution, I think they
yeah,
would
you can
say.
argue persecution. You can also argue, as the church does, that the saints weren't worthy, and that's why they
Yeah.
were removed. So
Yeah.
the saints' unworthiness is why it didn't get built. You can make 1,000 different arguments about it. The bottom line is temples don't always get built where they're announced to, and
Or at all, like China. It is not on the list
yeah,
anymore. And that was a big one. Everyone went, oh my gosh.
it,
And it's off the list.
if you don't look at it as, oh my gosh, if it doesn't get built here, prophecy fails, and that means the church isn't true. That's the tact that's why so many members insist it has to be there. But if you just look at it as, it's a site we picked, and if it doesn't work, we move it and we find a better site, or we conform with the property codes, then you don't have this problem. The problem is this insistence that the Lord said it, therefore it has to be.
Yeah. That's my AI of God looking at a map going here and here
Here,
and
yeah.
here and here. But it seems like God is beholden to zoning codes and things like that because, like Prosper, this is not where the temple was supposed to be. Interesting. All right. To be clear, I think Fairview is in the wrong. But at some point, it needs to be asked, is it worth it? There are other spots in the far north it could be built. Originally, it was going to be in Prosper. The other deals are certainly relevant for showing the city isn't playing by the rules, and sticking to them would be great, but a vendetta isn't the Lord's way. So a lot of members had this sentiment. They still think the town's in the wrong. They think the church is in the right, but they're just saying, let's just end this. It's too much because, we live in the town. We're dealing with this on the ground. So I think that's very interesting. There were a lot of comments like this. It's not what the Lord would want you to do. Let's be more Christ-like.
Yeah. And again, the other deals are certainly relevant for showing the city isn't playing by the rules. I'm not sure which, I'm guessing they're talking bell tower and the fact that they're saying, but again, it was never built and it was never finalized. Therefore, they were playing by the rules. They went through the exact same process and it never got built and it never got through the final process. So I don't know how they can say the city isn't playing by the rules because it didn't get built because they never had a finalized plan.
No, well, I feel like you see these letters from the stakes going out to people, and they have verbiage very carefully crafted that say, as much as we've done all we can, or we've made these significant concessions, we have done everything. We have played by the rules. So, of course, the membership is going to think that.
Yeah, and I think that's what's happening here. And so, yeah, if you only get your information from the church,
yes,
but take a look. Go, we have a whole episode about why the bell tower it was never approved, and we show why it wasn't approved. And
with Nemo, that was an awesome episode.
Yeah, yeah. So you can go look at that, and then you can decide. You might say, no, they approved it, and that's fine because the city did approve. They did say they didn't have a problem with it, but it never got finalized. Therefore, you can't use it as a legal precedence. That's like a bill getting all the way through to the House, and then they never vote on it, and then saying, well, they were going to they would have approved it had they voted on it. Well, it's never got approved. It didn't finish the process, and that's how this is. So
that is a
to
great
use it as
example.
precedence isn't, and to now say that a city government 20 years later has to comply with what was proposed 20 years earlier is ridiculous.
Right.
You just can't put that. Things change too much in 20 years.
They do. And there is speculation that is why the church moved from Prosper to Fairview, because they thought they had that precedent. And also, some of the legal people have said your ordinances are more wiggly, more loose. There's more room for us to work in.
You keep hearing people say, move it to Prosper. Why didn't they build in Prosper? Because they knew they'd have the same problem in Prosper that they're having here. That's why they moved it. They thought they had a better case here than they did in Prosper. So for everyone to just say, oh, move it to Prosper.
Yeah, they tried that.
The same problem. Move it to McKinney. Mosque have the same problem. You're going to have the same problem wherever you move it. If you insist that it goes in a residential area and exceeds the zoning codes.
Yep, unless the town doesn't seem to care. I mean, I'm still curious about the Tacoma Temple, which is going in Federal Way, because it's a McKinney-sized temple. It's like 3 times over their zoning codes there, which are regular codes. And, they presented that to the town council with some renderings. I haven't heard, any pushback or anything. So some areas just don't care. Other areas do care.
Yep.
Interesting. All right. Let's see. Your turn, I think.
I think we have hundreds more temples to build in the USA and will continue to find this NIMBY hate in roughly 1 out of 20 planned temple communities. I think if the church backs down and allows one of them to win, we will see NIMBY challenges to more like 1 in 5 temples, because if the church moved the temple in Texas, why not here? I want us to stand up for our right to build in every case possible and amass so many court victories that communities recognize that they cannot discriminate against our church when the church is meeting all basic construction requirements. Okay, again, you're not meeting the requirements.
Exactly.
You're getting an exemption from the requirements.
Yes.
That's why you need to have a cup. And who makes those decisions? The Planning and Zoning Committee. If you rule up all these cases, like you said, there's nothing to stop this very picture right here from being built in your backyard.
Anybody can build anything.
Anyone can build anything anywhere. You want to be very careful about that. You say that's what you want for you. The problem is this applies to everybody, and anyone can build anything they want in any neighborhood if this is allowed to stand. So you need to stand back and you need to look at it from both sides, because you don't want someone else building something in your backyard that you don't want, that doesn't comply. When you buy property, you look at where is it zoned and what can be built around me. Because you say, oh, this is zoned, they can't go and build a mall behind me because it's a residential zone, so I don't need to worry about that. But if the town then goes and changes it so they can build a mall, how fair is that to you, who built knowing you did your investigation, you saw what could be built there in the future, and it's just ignored? So if a church can build anything, anywhere, anytime, what's to prevent them from saying, you know what, we want to put a football stadium in this a church and say, we're a mega church. We have tens of thousands of people that come on, but we want to build it and make a football stadium. Then we'll rent it out to football teams. I mean, what would stop you? It's a church. If you want to argue it's a church, but you could, I mean, you can think up 1,000 cases where someone can think around the zoning codes by simply claiming to be a church. Or why not build a football stadium as a church and then you sell it, and then it's already built. It's kind of hard to say you can't play football when you already have a football stadium built there.
It sounds like this was maybe a dream of yours, Landon. Do you want to build a football stadium?
1,000 ways to skirt these rules if all you have to do, and you as the church get to say, that's our belief. Yeah. What keeps a football team from saying, we're now a church?
Tackles for Jesus.
Everyone goes here on Sunday. This is their church. Why can't we build in your neighborhood?
And we have that lawyer in Nauvoo, again, I bring that up, where he basically said, who gets to decide what a person's religious belief is? The church does. So that's exactly it. If we believe in watching a football game in our stadium, that's our religion. We get to decide. And that's very dangerous. And if you look at Europe, you look at the hoops the church has to jump through, they don't have this. They have locked down their zoning and their codes for exactly this reason. They are going to control what is built, how it's built, where it goes. And you can see the church reacting to that. They're very solicitous of the area and the authorities in the areas where they're building these temples. They're very, of course we'll change that. Of course we'll work with that. They don't have to do that here because of Rupa.
And again, if this person just asked the question, what if the church, instead of fighting all these court things to force it into neighborhoods, which is what he's saying, we want to force it in there. What if the church just built temple designs that fit within the community and within the standards of almost all residential areas? And then they don't have to force it in. And then we don't have to fight this. No one's saying don't have a temple. Just build a smaller one that fits if you're going to build it in a residential area. If you want it bigger, put it in a commercial zone.
Yep. And in this kind of comment, I really do not see anything about the purpose of the temple or what you're really building it for. This is, we're going to stick it to them. We're going to fight them. We're going to get in every town. We're going to show them. Where's the discussion of the peace you feel when you go there, or the work that you do for your ancestors? This is not how
And
they're
notice he
looking at
said,
temples.
we will build hundreds more temples in the USA. The church promotes itself as a global church.
Yeah.
And yet, oh, but in the USA, we're going to force temples on everyone else.
Yep.
Everywhere else, we're going to comply and it's okay. This is a very US centric
Yeah,
philosophy
it
here
is.
that we're going to force buildings down your throat. The rest of the world says you got to comply with the zoning codes. Only the US wants to force their First Amendment special religious privilege on everybody else.
Yep, because they can.
Because you
Interesting.
can.
Because they can. Although I feel like in South America, sometimes there are abuses as far
Oh,
as,
well, there's,
where they build things. We've done that episode on
yeah.
Peru. So I feel like there are some problems there
Well,
too.
there's every advantage that when you're building in smaller third world countries, that money solves a lot of problems,
Yeah,
and the
that
church
is
has a
true
lot
too.
of money and solves the problem that way.
Yeah. All right. Is it your turn? I'm not kidding. I'm not keeping up. We
I don't
talk too
know.
much.
I'll read. If I was in charge and with the information I have, moving would probably be easier and probably safer. I'm not sure what other factors could be involved. Someone says there are a lot of factors and I'm not privy to them, so my opinion isn't worth much. But this trestle certainly doesn't look good to people outside the church,
Mm-hmm.
even if the church is right. That may be unfair, but the world is full of double standards. So they reply, so if someone violates my rights, I should just let them since I don't want to look bad. Letting people roll over you isn't going to foster good feelings either. They reply, the follow-up question to that is, where is such a place where the saints will have easy access and the locals will not object? There will be a fight no matter where we go. I think
There
that,
will be if your church continues to build that way, but there doesn't have to be.
yeah, there's plenty of communities where there's not a fight.
Yeah. The
And
majority
a
there's not a
majority
fight.
doesn't have a fight. This persecution complex is
Mm-hmm.
just
Mm-hmm.
ridiculous. And again, there is an easier way. Just conform with the laws. That every one of these that I see ignores the fact that we could build a temple that meets the zoning requirements and we could propose it. Why aren't we doing that? I haven't seen that.
Nope, no one's asking that.
Everyone's saying, how can we force this temple on them? Or
Yeah.
how can we build the same temple? Why don't we go somewhere else? The easy one is, why don't we just build a temple here that conforms with the requirements?
Yep. And then we can do all the ordinances we need to do. We could take care of what's really important. As we've heard from Elder Bednar, no small temple. It's not the outside, it's what goes on inside. We heard it from President Nelson. These comments are all about asserting your rights, stomping and rolling over on other people. It doesn't have anything to do with the purpose of the temple. So ask yourself why.
I'd like to know where this place is that all these people are talking about that persecutes the church and does not let them have religious freedom. What town has outlawed the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints from being in or building a building? No one has. They've said they're enforcing their codes, but nobody has said you can't build a church here or you can't build a temple. They're simply dictating the requirements under which you can build that church. Nobody anywhere in the United States is telling the LDS Church, you can't come in our town and we don't want you here and you're not welcome here and we will chase you out, and burning crosses on their lawn and all of this. That is not happening in the U.S.
No.
As much as the members want to act like that's what's happening, that is not what's happening. And the one thing I hear over and over from Fairview residents is, we love our LDS neighbors. They are wonderful people.
Yep.
We just don't like this huge building.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. I think, to understand that, you have to be raised LDS like we were. And we've always heard that, they don't like us. They're after us. They're hurting us. They're running us out of town. And it's a persecution complex. It absolutely is, but it's not real. You're not persecuted if you have over $200 billion and you're a corporation. So, but it's a mindset.
And we saw this exact same thing play out in Provo, Utah, when the church tried to build an MTC that was too tall. The residents said, this is too tall. It's up against our houses. This needs to be reduced. And the church reduced it. They listened when they're in LDS communities. And anyone who says that's persecution, that's bigotry because they didn't want a tall MT. These are members of the church.
Yeah, and no one said that.
BYU professors and work for the church, and they're saying, no, this is too large.
Yep. No, we have a short on that because Laura Lee Hall was the one that designed it. And when she heard about the pushback, she went out, she talked to everybody, they redesigned it, and nobody said religious bigotry. It was simply about the building and the specifics of the height and what it would do to the neighborhood. And that's all it is here. So anyway, I like my AI, don't you? That's the mob coming for them. All right. Here again, this isn't about the temple. I don't think this is about religious freedom issue. And for whatever reason, it's one that the general church leadership feels strongly about. A lot of people have really negative feelings about the Savior during his mortal life. And maybe as often as not, he'd do things to intentionally antagonize them. So basically saying, people didn't like Jesus. You got to do what you got to do. And I love this picture because it's a picture of, the money changers. He's casting out the people that were basically selling the path to God. And I thought, well, isn't that what the temple is? You must pay 10% to go in. I feel like Jesus might do a little casting out if he came back and saw what was going on in his name in that way. But this, again, religious freedom, we've talked about this before. It's just what a lot of people feel.
Well, this is funny because he'd said the last thing here, he'd do things to intentionally antagonize them.
Yeah.
So evidently a Christ-like attribute is to intentionally antagonize people and see how they react and then
If it's
sue
for
them when
religious
they
freedom.
react differently. Is he saying the church is intentionally antagonizing the community just to try to make a point, and that's religious freedom? And let's be real, religious freedom was not what Jesus was about. He was raised in a community that was completely Jewish. You would be stoned if you did not adhere to the Sabbath. There was no religious freedom at all. So I don't even know what the comparison here is. This is just kind of a ridiculous comment in my opinion.
Yeah, it is what it is. All right, let's move on. All right, go ahead with this one.
I don't understand why in Finland steeple is under 94 feet and in Paris is 120 feet. Which is not correct. Paris is not 120 feet.
No, it's
As a
not
member,
at all.
I'm annoyed because sacred funds are going to fill up lawyers' pockets. At this point, it's not about the temple, but to prove a point. President Nelson said peacemakers are needed more than ever, and true disciples of Christ are peacemakers. Can we be more peacemakers? We need the local community. We need to make friends, not enemies. Imagine our missionaries knocking on someone's door in Fairview. They will be faced with rejection because we don't want to give up on 30 feet.
Yep,
I
that's a great
100% agree
comment.
with this person.
No, I know, me too. 100%.
I think
No,
they
I thought that was
misstated
really
Paris
good.
is not 120. Paris has no
No.
steeple on it.
No, it had a steeple, but they
It had
took
a
it off.
steeple and they took it off. Exactly what she's describing.
Yep.
They were peacemakers. They realized in France they couldn't bully anyone, and they said, "Let's do." So, are you a peacemaker though when you agree to something when you have no choice, but when you're the one who thinks you have the power, you force it down somebody's throat? That's not a peacemaker. A peacemaker is someone who's willing to find common ground no matter what. And they're exactly right. This is the problem. The church gets up and talks about this.
Yes.
But then they don't do what they say. This was the biggest problem that made me leave the church, was when I realized everything the church is telling me to do, they are not doing themselves. So that was the problem.
Yep. No, and they're not wrong about the missionaries. They're not wrong at all because everyone knows about the temple going on. There's also a wild amount of anti-church activity behind this too. There was a petition in another antagonistic subreddit asking people to send in letters to the McKinney Town Council, they mean Fairview, to tell them how horrible the church is. Oh my goodness. And many, many ex-members sent letters in, and some events went to the public, and some even went to the public meeting. This is actually, they're not correct on that. They're actually talking about LDS members. They were the ones, here's a copy of the email sent out by the stake, that were told to send 15,000 emails to the town of Fairview, which people don't realize they have to log each email. And we've talked to people in Fairview, and it absolutely gridlocked the town. It shut them down as their ability to do their normal functions because of this. And it says, and even went to the public meetings. The church told them, the members, to go to the public meeting wearing white shirts, in Vegas blue shirts. The sheer number of them to intimidate, and the number of emails in Vegas. We had the town council member, remember, put her hand on the stacks. Look how many letters we got, from faithful Mormons, because they're told to do it. People don't understand outside of the church this hive mentality. And with one push of a button, you can send an email to thousands of people and tell them to do what you need to get done. So this person, I think, got it backwards. The residents were not doing this, and the ex-Mormons were. post-Mormons may have written to the towns and said, look, this is not cool. But the church is the one that had a systematic campaign of 15,000 emails and all those white shirts that you saw in some of the pictures.
And they said it was another antagonistic subreddit, so I'm guessing they're talking about ex-Mormon Reddit. And I'm guessing there were people who said write letters to the city council.
I think we said it. Yeah.
But that's exactly all they're saying is, hey, let them hear both sides.
Yeah.
The church has said send in 15,000 emails. Some of those should be people who say no, the church does not have because they told them in there, make sure you say how important the height of the steeple is. And a lot of ex and post Mormons said, that's not important. And I think it's important that the town knows that that's not a doctrine of the Mormon church. And we're going to state that and tell them that. Everyone has a right to petition. It's a little when a church orders their members to send in and tells them how many to send in and tells them what to say in it, but they have a right to it. I don't think it was a good look to have thousands of people who didn't belong in the council. But once the church opened that door, they kind of opened the door for everyone outside the community to weigh in on it. But yeah, the majority of these letters came from the church, and I think that was a response to their call for 15,000 emails, where other people said, wait a minute, it's not fair that they order that and just 15,000 people all on one side write in and nobody writes to say why it shouldn't be there.
Yeah. And this is only a part of the email. They went through, this is what you need to write, put it in your own words. I mean, it was very, very crafted, gave all the addresses and everything. And you're right. Somebody like Nemo actually went to the town and said, the steeple doctrine is not real. So a lot of people, I think, probably did reach out and talk about that, because who else would know that but LDS members can say, no, this is not real. They're trying to pull one over you. There is no steeple doctrine. So,
and you have to keep in mind that many of those people that you're calling anti-church are members of the church.
Exactly.
Nemo was a member of the church. We're both still members of the church. You don't get to say we have 17 million members, but only 3 million of them can say what they want to say. The others can't because they don't really go to church and they don't really count as members, but we have 17 million members.
Yeah, we're part of those members. That's
yeah,
exactly right. Yeah, there was another young man that spoke too, that got up at one of the meetings and talked about the steeple doctrine. That was a very polarizing thing that happened. So
it was. Yep.
Anyway, interesting. All right, go ahead.
At one point, Jesus himself had had enough. He walked away, purposely braided a whip, and came back and proceeded to use it to cleanse another temple.
Yeah, I guess they're saying tough love. But again, I make the point, how would Jesus feel? You have to pay that money or you can't go in.
Yeah, yeah.
It's kind of the same thing. Money changers, you're buying your favors, you're buying your little things to take in, you're buying your sacrifice.
And in this case, Jesus cleansed a temple, not a town. It wasn't the town that was doing wrong. It was the church that was doing wrong. So I think Jesus maybe needs to go in and cleanse the church office buildings and say, this is not my doctrine. This is not love one another. This is not, how you behave in your community. I said, render under Caesar what is Caesar. So let the town council decide what is the requirement for my temples, or what the limits are, and I'll concede to those. I'll render to Caesar what's Caesar. That's what Jesus said. To say, oh, Jesus got mad and cleansed the temple, that was against church leadership. The temple was run by lawyers and the Sanhedrin and the different groups that were that he hated. He hated lawyers. He speaks all the time about lawyers, yet you've got a church full of lawyers. Jesus would have cleansed that group, not the town council.
That's a good point. And a lot of people believe Jesus is here right now. We just don't know it. So maybe he'll go take care of it. I don't know.
Let him solve it. Yeah.
All right. Was there one right? Okay.
Did I skip one?
I don't know. I can't.
Oh, right there. Okay.
Yes. Okay. I think you need to broaden your perspective. This is a bigger issue than the building of one temple, although that's a really big deal. This is a religious freedom issue, I think. The town disapproves of a Latter-day Saint building because of the height, for example, but not a Methodist building. So again, they're confused by the bell tower. The Savior intentionally made plenty of enemies in defense of what was important at the time and place. This might be a similar issue. The Lord directs his church, whether with the permission of imperfect members and leaders or without it. Religious freedom is one of the major issues of our time. So maybe that's what this is all about. So he kind of hits some things that we've already discussed. Again, important to assert your religious rights, and the precedent of the Methodist bell tower, which unfortunately that's incorrect, and also that it's up to the Lord and he wants what he wants when he wants it. So
Again, very U.S. centric.
yep.
That the Lord cares, all the Lord cares about is freedom of religion in the United States, and doesn't care about the other, 90% of the world
Yep.
population that doesn't live within the United States. And that the most important thing to him is that he can build a large building somewhere in the U.S. while children starve in Africa,
Yeah.
and where genocide is committed all over the world. But his number one concern is whether you can build a temple and break the zoning codes of a town. Again, freedom of religion means that you are not discriminated against and you're free to practice your religion. And you can practice your religion anywhere in the United States. That does not mean you get to break the code. If your religion is to, we want to offer human sacrifice, you can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
That would not stand up in the U.S. But that's a larger issue. Freedom of religion. You should be allowed to do that. No, everyone would agree that's not. So at what point does it end? Well, building codes should, as long as you build within the building codes, you should be able to build. Everyone agrees that's freedom of religion. So, religious privileges, I should build whatever I want, whenever I want, however I want. That's privilege.
Yep. And if that's where they're really trying to take it, we've done an episode with Colby Reddish on, are they really trying to just make this point to go to the Supreme Court on Rupa? Then that's kind of a scary path, because there really is no check or balance to anything.
And if the Supreme Court sides with the church on this, God help us all, because
Yeah.
you just basically said religion does not have to answer to the state. And that's a very dangerous place to be, when religion doesn't have to obey the laws of the state.
Yeah, that's a
They're
handmaiden's
unchecked.
tale right
Yeah.
there. All right. You can read this one.
From someone who lived in that part of Texas for 20 years, this is my surprised face. The same Texans who shout the loudest about the freedoms love to restrict others' freedoms.
Right. It's kind of the same thing.
Yeah. Again, I don't understand how you're restricting freedom by saying you must,
Yeah.
abide by the zoning codes.
No, but a lot of them really care about this. A lot of the faithful members really care about this religious freedom issue, and we see that in other areas too. So I'm not LDS, but I am genuinely surprised the case has gone this far. Why does the temple need such a tall spire? The beautiful Paris temple doesn't have a spire, and that was partly because of zoning issues, and the church was fine with that. The Copenhagen temple does not have a spire. Mesa, Arizona, Karsten, Alberta, and others. I absolutely think the town has, in many degrees, acted unfairly and with bias toward the LDS church, but I must admit I am a bit surprised by the church did not amend the spire initially. The LDS church in general emphasizes working closely with the local communities where it builds temples, and making sure the letter of the law is followed, because they have amended as needed, i.e. the Paris temple. Again, not in the United States. As an outsider, the case is interesting to follow. I think LDS temples are always beautiful architectural wonders, but they are also always adapted to the environment they are located in. And this person may be talking about temples from the past where they did adapt and they did talk to people, but in the last couple of years, not at all. And when they point to Paris, as we've discussed, they have to follow those codes. They have wiggle room here. So, but it's interesting that people who are not LDS are watching it too, because there's so much in it. There's a lot of things that mean a lot more than just this temple.
But they actually have, in Yorba Linda, they did.
Yeah.
And
Oh yeah. No, there are others too where they've amended.
in Bakersfield, they did the opposite. Originally, they submitted with a smaller steeple,
Yeah.
and then they went and added on to it. So if you can make it bigger, why can't you make it smaller?
You'll have to ask the stake president, who's the town manager, whether or not that will have impact. I don't know. All right, let's go as we're finishing up here.
Cynically, the church has a strong legal case. Similar height exemptions given to other churches, history of making good faith changes to try to compromise with the city council, etc. And so it is good as a test case for clarifying, strengthening First Amendment rights for future buildings, both ours and other minority religions. And someone said, to prevent others from trying to employ similar discrimination tactics by thinking they can hold a temple hostage and get away with it, we don't have to salt the earth per se, but we should demonstrate that we know our rights and will stand by them rather than surrender our freedom to bullies. Again, yeah.
We're out of words now. We're just out.
Yep. Rights, rights, rights. It's all about your rights.
Yeah.
I don't know. You would think the LDS are the most discriminated people in the
Yeah.
entire United States.
Minority. They call themselves
Yes.
a minority.
And yet
Well, they are a minority with people wise,
they are a
3.5
minority of
million
people
active,
wise. And
money
yet,
and influence and power and political leaders in positions in the legislature and the federal government. They outweigh most other
way,
religions, I think.
way outweigh.
Yeah.
I can't think of any other state in the union that is completely controlled by a church.
Mm-hmm.
Utah completely controlled by the church. 80% legislatures is LDS. There's no other state in the union where
Yeah.
anyone has that kind of influence. Look at how many senators from Idaho, Nevada,
Yeah.
Arizona, way out of proportion, representatives of senators compared to the number of people in the church. They got RLUIPA passed by using U.S. senators.
Mm-hmm.
They handpick
LDS U.S. senator.
they handpick who gets to run as a senator in Utah. The church, if you don't have the church's blessing, you will not win as a U.S. senator in Utah. Nobody has more influence in government compared to their numbers than the LDS church. Maybe there's a few small rich groups, but who has been able to amass major landowner in how many states? They're the biggest landowner in how many states? At least
Mm-hmm.
two, maybe three. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, they have way over what everyone else has. And yet they're the most persecuted people, and they've amassed billions and billions of dollars of wealth,
Yeah.
huge political power. Where I don't see it. I don't see it. Someone show it to me. I just don't see it.
No, it's not there. And I think the church has been thinking of themselves as being David in the David and Goliath story for a very long time. And they play that card and they tell their members that they're David. They're not, they're Goliath. And everyone else sees it. And it's a really bad look when they bully like that, but they are the Goliath.
And every time government has pushed into the church, when was it? Polygamy,
Yeah.
blacks in the priesthood,
Yep.
and all of us would stand back now and say those were good things. Boy, we're all glad those are gone out of the church. But it was the government's pushing that got those changed, not anything else. And so, if you want to say the government bullied, we all agree that what they did was better.
Yeah.
Government had people's backs more than church did.
Yep. They had to step in at that point to end those practices, those atrocities. All right. Oh, what about this one, Landon?
I really don't understand why we're picking this fight.
So there you go. There's somebody, like I said, there were balanced comments.
Yeah.
It was interesting. There was misinformation, but there were some people who were just like, this is ridiculous. So I thought that was good.
Again, lower the steeple 30
Done
feet.
deal.
The,
Yep.
the inside the temple would look exactly the same because you
Yep.
don't look up into the steeple. The
No.
steeple's just
There aren't any windows. You can't even see outside. But as that woman in the first slide said, was I married in a temple? Was it great? Whatever. It didn't have a steeple. Was my wedding diminished? Yes, it was. So they've been told that recently that it was diminished.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Asserting your legal option is not the same as bullying. Religious prejudice is at the root of this conflict. So we've talked about this already, but a lot of people do believe this. And I think they're hearing this from leadership. They're conditioned to think this way. They're the David, but they're not. They're the Goliath.
And let's look how this started. The very initial meeting that the church had with the community, and we have the tape recordings, the church lawyers came out and said, this is our legal right to do it, and we will sue you if you do not allow us to.
Yep.
That is not asserting your legal option. That's leading with your legal option.
Yep, that's a bully.
That's a bully. The way you do this in a community is you go and you talk to the community, you show them your plans, you don't lie to them and tell them it's a two-story building when it's 170 something feet tall. You come in, you show them the plans, you get their comment, you tell them what you do there, you try to inform them, you try to educate them, and you try to get them on your side. Going in and telling them you're going to sue them right off the bat, that's not asserting your legal options. That is bullying, and that's what they pull up every time because they have $100 billion. Why didn't the mosque push back and assert their legal rights?
In McKinney.
Because they don't have billions of dollars to fight it, so they can't. So your legal option is only a legal option because you have so much money, because you're so privileged, because you have tax-free exemption that you can invest your money over and over with no and don't have to report to anyone and can lie to the government about how many billions of dollars you have, and you can buy land all over and have tax write-offs. That's how you amassed all of this money. So
Yeah. And in the case of McKinney and the mosque, they really could have used RLUIPA because there were some hateful, very prejudiced, bigoted things said by the people in the audience there. Like, I don't want my kid indoctrinated walking in front of your mosque, or we don't want you here. That's what RLUIPA is for. But again, they chose not to. They just, the Islamic community went back and kind of retooled their design. So, but you're absolutely right. In all the towns that we follow, that initial meeting, that meet and greet, come find out what we're about. It always just eroded at the end when the residents are asking legitimate questions. What is this? What will it be? Why isn't it following the codes? It always, by the end, just completely deteriorated into, well, of course we can sue. That's what they said in Heber. That's what they said in Cody. That's what they said in Lone Mountain. That's what they said in Fairview. The end of that meet and greet is always, well, but you know what we can do.
Yep.
Yeah.
And RLUIPA is by no means settled law. In fact, the law that was the predecessor of RLUIPA was deemed unconstitutional.
That's right.
And then they passed RLUIPA to try to be but it hasn't gone through the test that the others have. No. And the church probably does want to push it now when they've got a completely sympathetic court to that. The entire administrations that have been voted in have the complete support of the religious right, and that's what they're putting in as judges. And now that they have that, they want to try to push those things through.
No, and that's a good point, because when RLUIPA does go to court, it goes either way. If you look at the cases, it really depends. So I can see they want something definitive. We've talked to Colby Reddish on an episode about this, and this really could be that. Let's lock this down while we can. And then, like you said, there's no protections for towns. Anybody can build anything if it's their religious right. So, all right. Oh, here you go. You want to read this one, Landon?
Maybe I'm wrong in thinking this, but I think if there was any other church making a similar building, it would not have this kind of backlash. I'm not necessarily saying it's because they outright hate us, but there is a lot of misinformation on us, so many dislike us simply because they were told to.
Yeah, wow. What they call misinformation is just church history.
Well, again, we just showed, and we have an episode on McKinney voting down the Muslim in the town right next to it, literally.
Right, and we should point out the members of McKinney, the LDS members, come over to Fairview to fight for the temple because they're the ones that are going to be going there. I mean, the towns are interlocked.
Yep, and their own town voted down the mosque, which was much smaller and much less tall than this, and they voted it down. So there's proof right there that that is not the case. The Muslims had backlash too, but they didn't go this route. And to say there's a lot of misinformation on us, look at what misinformation the church gives to you. Most members, I know they don't want to hear it, but we were all faithful members. And then when we started looking into it, we started realizing that, Joseph Smith was using a rock and a hat to translate the Book of Mormon, that there never was a lot of the stories didn't really happen. Brigham Young didn't stand up and transfigure into Joseph Smith like we were told. No. I can go on and on and on about.
I mean, you were a seminary teacher, Landon.
Oh yeah.
Bishopric member.
The church never told us that the Book of Abraham is written in Egyptian and that we can translate Egyptian, and it says nothing even close to what he said. Yeah. But the church never told us these things. So yeah, there is a lot of misinformation out there. Don't just think that your church is telling you the full truth. Check into it. Look at and see what they're telling you and ask yourself, is this true or not? And you have a right to choose, but we're just saying, take a look, because the things they've told you is not, we were never told Joseph. We always heard Joseph and Emma. We didn't know he had 37 wives and that he wasn't sealed to Emma until wife number 21. There's a lot of misinformation out there. We weren't told. Why weren't we told that the church had amassed billions of dollars in SEC funds? That was never divulged to us. Why not? Ask yourself those questions. Look at the town. On the other hand, everything has to be open and and transparent. And that's what they're doing. And because you're seeing this, how the sausage is made on one side, and you're completely being, oh, I like this sausage better. Look, I just get a sausage. I don't have to watch how it's made. But when you're doing government, it has to be open and transparent, and you get to see it. And you may see things that you don't like, but I can guarantee you the same thing's happening on the church's side.
Right.
But they just like to hide it and then point to the sausage being made on the other side.
Yep, that's exactly right. All right. Oh, this person says, not totally related, but I really like the post-compromise design. Do you? But again, our point here is, look at this. It looks like it's drawn on a napkin. I mean, there's things crossed out, heights written in. This is what the church is saying. You guys need to approve this. And the town's saying, I mean, what else? Like traffic and sewer and lighting. And is this really what it is? And what does it look like? They're just asking for natural rendering. And I look at this and I think, honestly, that steeple, if you can call it a steeple, if they just did something like what the McKinney temple looked like, where there were gradations as it went higher and it got smaller and smaller and thinner, I think something like that would work. Lower the height, make it sort of staggered with more of a tall spire, and you've got what's a win-win for everybody.
And there isn't a post-compromise design. The compromise, they included some exhibits that said it'll be similar to this.
Right, but we don't know.
We don't have a design yet. Yeah. That's what they were supposed to submit, was the finalized design with the details, and that never got submitted. And that's the point we were at. The town said, we'll compromise to this level, or we'll support a compromise to this level. We'll recommend it. They don't have to vote for it. We'll recommend it. But so far, the town, they've compromised on the concept, but they haven't seen a design because the church never put it forth.
Right. And there was another design that was worked on in this mediation that looks even kind of different. It has more of a squared off dome. So really, we don't know what that final design is going to look like because they never submitted. Okay. You want to read this one, Landon?
It's time to slam dunk it in court, then show up with a blueprint that looks like it's 5 stories, 90,000 square feet, and lights up the sky like for miles. Then when we build the 2-story 40K square foot, they will not only be happy, but say, oh, if we would have known it was like that, we wouldn't have fought like they always do.
So manipulate everybody. It's kind of like the initial letter that came out where they said it's just a 1-story building. Just keep everybody confused. Nobody knows what's going in. Nobody knows what it is. Do a takeaway. Yeah. Again, you're playing with people's lives.
Let's lie about it, the whole process, and then look like we're compromising in the end and still break everything that they said.
It's just not the way you treat people in your community. These are neighbors and friends.
Yeah. Yep.
You don't do this to people. So,
this is the thinking that gets you in the trouble that you're in right now.
Yes, 100%. And build a sewage plant.
Yep. Let's just lie and manipulate everybody to get what we want. That's how
that'll show them. That'll teach them. And then the missionaries will come and everyone will join the church. At least some of the town's more vocal citizens are making it clear that they would prefer no temple at all. Never. They all say, we welcome a temple. Just follow.
Show me where they said we don't want your temple here.
Never.
I've never seen that in the.
Nope. That's why I said never. And we've talked to these people. Never. Whether that is a reflection of the majority is not clear at all. As a TBM, I think how interesting that somebody would refer to themselves as a TBM.
Yeah.
That's very unusual. As a TBM, I think the church would do well to find a suitable site in nearby community that welcomes them. Of course, to be rejected would make Fairview mad as well. You can't make some people happy. This comment makes no sense, but the big takeaway is they have never, ever said you can't have a temple here. Any religion is welcome to build anything that they want in the town as long as they go through the process. And this is talking about the original article again, the original post.
Yeah, this is a very misleading article. The church is still yet to submit the new designs discussed during the mediation session, effectively robbing the town of Fairview of any chance to approve or deny the new design. If anything, the church negotiated in bad faith.
Yep, wow. And we covered that. That's exactly right.
And this is on the faithful thread. Yeah. Now, that doesn't mean the person saying it's faithful, but yeah.
Yeah, well, no, I think they are, because if you try to post there,
that's true.
They look at your post history And if you've ever said anything or posted on any site, like an ex-Mormon Reddit or a Mormon Reddit, they ban you instantly. So it's very curated. It really is only faithful people. But this is why I make the joke about it was on a napkin. Look here, this is from the mediation, and 125 is crossed out. Other things are written in 120 top. They're still working this out. There is no final rendering.
And that's exactly what the mayor's saying. It's not final yet. The church is supposed to come back with a new plan. Yeah, they negotiated these requirements, but there is nothing for them to. Again, the city can only approve what the church submits.
Yep.
The church never submitted this proposal. So again, this goes back to the clock, to the bell tower. The church is saying we're trying to protect our legal standing because if we submit a smaller plan, then the court battle goes on what we submitted, and so we're not going to submit anything different. But then they ignored that the Methodist Church never submitted a final approval, and so they're using a completely different standard for the.
That's a double standard. You're right.
Yeah, for the church.
How interesting.
Other church.
Yeah, because had they submitted this, if anything went to court, this would be what they're arguing over. Now it's back to the original one because they've never submitted any other design. That's such an interesting point.
And vice versa, the Methodists did submit another design, and that's what got approved, and it was 48 feet. Yet the church is saying, no.
It was the original one
approved before that never got finalized. So
I've never thought of it that way. Wow, you're blowing my mind, Landon. I didn't think there was another angle I hadn't ever thought about. Geez, just make it lower like the city wants. Put the Moroni on the ground or something. I hate these pointless battles. And then someone says back, here's the problem. The church did make it lower like the city wanted from 174 feet to 120 feet. Still bigger than the zoning allows. That was all settled during mediation. However, the city did an about face and publicly rejected the mediation agreement despite privately approving it weeks prior. No. It was in
completely
mediation.
Wrong.
It was non-binding. They did not have to approve. It was non-binding. They simply said, all right, we'll open this up. We'll put this through the process. The town people said, this is still too tall, which is their right. And now we're back to square one. But that's pretty much full of nothing.
Let's look at everything that's wrong with that statement. The church did make it lower like the city wanted. The city told them at the last thing that 68 foot was the limit. So it's not like the city wanted.
Nope,
they made it 120 feet, almost twice what the city wanted. The city, this was all settled during the mediation. It wasn't settled.
Non-binding.
It was agreed to that they would accept 120 feet. But in order to do that, the church has to bring forth a plan that they can approve. It said, however, the city did an about face and publicly rejected the mediation agreement despite privately approving it weeks before.
Not true.
They did not privately approve it weeks before. They publicly approved it weeks before. Read the mediation agreement. That was the requirement. Had to be voted on in open session. And the mayor said in the meeting it was approved 6-0. So it was not privately approved. It was publicly approved. That they would support they'd support approving it, but they didn't approve it. They simply said we would approve these heights. Right. And they never rejected the mediation agreement. They said, we're not sure it will pass at this point because there's still a lot of, they were being honest with the church. Right. They were saying, hey, we think this is a good idea. We as the leaders still support it, but there's still a lot of pushback from the community church.
It's a democratic process.
We're being open and telling you the honest truth. But we're still supporting it. They even said that. We're still in agreement. The mayor and the mayor pro tem said we will still support it. We can't speak for everybody, but we're still supporting it. They never rejected it. They simply said it's got a lot lower than we thought. There's still a lot of pushback, and they're being honest and helping the church out, telling them you might want to, if you could make some changes, you might improve the chances of this getting approved.
Yep. And again, just misinformation.
You want me to read that?
Yeah, go ahead.
The temple doesn't need such a tall spire, but the town had already approved a local Methodist church with a similarly tall reach, so it didn't seem like it'd be controversial. After pushback, the church was true to form and compromised and significantly shortened the spire, reduce the floor size significantly, etc., and the town has no interest in compromising and is pushing for further reductions. I'm not from Utah and haven't ever lived there, and so I can state confidently that there are definitely cases and communities where genuine religious bigotry against the church exists in the United States. And this town is giving me a lot of indications that its concerns are a Trojan horse for trying to run the church's temple out of town.
Yep, same old thing.
Same thing. Yep, same argument. And again, we significantly shortened the spire and reduced the floor size. The church, the town never said you had to reduce the floor size.
No,
It could have still
it
been
was all height.
42,000 square feet. They just said you can't have 62-foot walls because we'll let you have 42, and you can't have a 120-foot steeple. You can have let's see, and the Methodist Church had to conform with the same thing. Their roof height is within those same parameters. Everything on the Methodist Church meets the parameters that the town council gave to the LDS Church. So it's ridiculous to make the argument that this is bigotry. Every other church in town falls within those requirements.
Yep. I would love to see these other towns where there is religious bigotry and people with torches are saying, "Get out, LDS."
Yeah.
I would love to see that. That's not happening. We believe in being subject to kings, presidents, rulers, and magistrates, and obeying, honoring, and sustaining the law. Somebody's quoting the 12th article of faith. Exactly, which is why the church is abiding by the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act, which is a federal law that trumps local zoning laws. No, it does not. Sounds like local officials need to sustain federal law. Nope. And so again, this is the kind of thing that when RLUIPA has been taken to court before, it can go either way. But I think they would like it to trump local zoning laws until somebody builds a giant, right, something in their own backyard.
The Justice Department put out a memorandum that the church references all the time in their when they roll out these and start using the religious land use. And right in it, it specifically says this does not automatically trump zoning laws of local communities. They say that. So again, this is the churches talking from their position saying we got this trump card that overrides your zoning laws. But again, there's certain conditions. It has to be a significant burden on the church. Mm-hmm. It has to be doctrinally, which is why everyone's so mad, because the church lied to try to get these legal terms utilized. They said the height of the steeple is important. We have a temple doctrine that says we must have a high steeple to focus on. All of that wording was to try to make the case for RLUIPA, because it's not important to them, and that can be shown by the fact that they don't have steeples on all of the churches. And so the town said, that's not a religious tenet of your faith, and this is not a significant burden on you to require you to build it within our codes. We are not putting a significant burden. That's why you saw the ridiculous that they had to drive 20 minutes extra to the temple was a burden on them. That was a legal argument they were trying to make to show that there was a burden on them. Someone show me.
They have to prove burden. They have to prove it in order to activate RLUIPA.
Exactly.
And this all started in Cody, really, because when the church was saying, we've got to have our steeple, the Cody residents said, where? Show us. Where's it in your doctrine? It wasn't there. Flash forward 6 months to Fairview, and they're telling the members, make sure that you write a letter that says you've got to have a steeple, and it's really important to your worship. They've got to get that into the lexicon, right? They've got to put it in there so they can claim, horrible burden. We've got to activate RLUIPA because we must have a steeple. Unfortunately, there's so many statements from church leaders saying it's not about the look of the building, it's what happens inside. So we've collected all those. It's pretty funny, but that's why members themselves and former members rose up and said that is not part of our religion. That has never been part of our religion. You cannot add this now, and just simply to activate RLUIPA. But then we saw people making statements in these meetings in tears saying, yes, the steeple is that important to me. Yes, my wedding was diminished, being told to say that. And we just couldn't let that stand. I think the steeple doctrine really broke open temple building for everybody.
If you have to change your doctrine in order to manipulate a legal loophole, is that Jesus?
Yeah.
That's commanding that? Is that prophecy? Who's running your church?
Yeah.
It's obvious the lawyers are running the doctrine, not the prophet.
Excellent point. I like my AI there. I said it told it to make a king and it made a lion. Okay, I think it's your turn. I think
Sounds
we're
like
almost
bad
done.
faith negotiating, though I think the initial compromise was totally reasonable to ask for. It seems at this point that the church is trying to send a message to other communities who may not want a temple. Whether that approach is Christ-like or not, I'll let the first presidency decide. There are like a dozen cities with land for sale within the same distance of the Dallas temple. Surely we can find a place to build.
Yeah.
And again,
Again,
nobody's
moderate.
asking you to move locations. They're simply saying conform with the zoning law of the location you picked. And you're right. You can pick other locations that will allow the bigger, if that's what you want. So if
But
you
they may
want,
not. They could try to move it into Allen and say, hey, we're building this, 173 feet. And Allen could say, well, that doesn't meet our codes. Why did they think moving to another location will change?
yeah, I
It may
mean,
not.
sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that always works is conform with the building
Mm-hmm.
codes that council cannot deny you if you meet
Yep,
their codes.
that's right.
And that's religious freedom.
That's it.
As a religion, they cannot deny it to you because you've conformed with all of their code requirements.
100%. All right. Here's my final slide. Just kind of sums it all up. One person said, this is a bad look for the church. And the other person said, this town has been a nightmare. So, and this kind of sentiment you're going to, I think, see in the town, regardless of what happens. What was a cohesive community? People had their different religions, but they worked together in schools and other settings. Now there's division. There's an us versus them. And we have seen this in all the towns that we follow, some to the extreme where people walk into a community building, they see somebody from the other side, and they walk out. Like, it is divisive. It's really, really sad. I think that's the saddest part of this for all of us following it.
And it doesn't have to be if you just look at what are the zoning requirements. You go in, you talk to the town, you find out what the zoning requirements are. You know you're breaking them when you ask for this, but then you need to be willing to say, look, we asked,
Mhm.
but here's the answer we got when we went through the process. Now let's comply and get this done.
Yeah, that's right. I think I have one
Now,
final slide to laugh at this
everyone
one.
else in the world has to do it.
Everyone else has to do it. When I said final thoughts and takeaway, and I thought, given how heated we've been, we just needed I mean, not so much in this episode, but past episodes, we've been pretty heated. A nice calming beach, right?
There we go. That's the look we need.
That's the look we need. Maybe we need to go to the beach. What do you think?
You know what would improve this beach? A temple right there on the beach.
Of course it would. Now we're angry again. No, and we're not angry. We just really hope the best for all the people, that the members can get their temple, that the residents can have something that follows the zoning and fits into the community, and it's a win-win, and everybody can go back to just being neighbors the way that they were. And that's really all that we hope, because we talk to people on the ground, and there's heartbreak and confusion and frustration as what's happened to my community. What has happened in some of the towns. The town council is standing with the residents. In others, the residents are suing their town councils, and the church is on board with the lawsuit and is supporting them financially. It's just wreaked havoc wherever it goes. And I just feel it doesn't have to happen that way.
Agreed 100%.
Yep, I think so too. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed going through these comments. I thought it was really interesting and positive that a lot of people, while there may be misinformation, a lot of them are still saying, do we really have to do this? They're thinking of the greater good, and they're thinking of the town as a whole. So it was positive to me, a lot of the comments.
Yeah, I was surprised how many people said, "Hey, church, this is not worth it. Why are we doing this?" And I was surprised at that because typically, especially knowing the subreddit that it was on, because
Yes.
I've tried to post comments, and because I've posted in other places, I've been banned from there, and I didn't even say anything negative on their site, but
Yeah.
they rejected me immediately because I'd
Yep.
posted somewhere else.
Me
So
too. Banned in like
to
30
have
seconds. Yeah.
any fairness on this site really surprised me, because they so often, anyone who said anything blatantly harsh against it, I know would have been taken off. So
Yeah. And I didn't even see when they do delete comments, there's a little delete, delete, delete. And I've seen some threads where there was nothing really deleted. So it's a very interesting thread. And I think it's, taking the pulse of the membership. And I think maybe they're kind of fed up a little bit with this temple stuff. Just build it, just get it done. It's important what happens inside to us. The outside, it doesn't matter. And it's going to be beautiful no matter what size it is. It's going to be, beautiful to them, a beautiful, well cared for building. So, well, awesome. Thank you for going through all those. That was a lot. It took longer than I thought, but I think it's important. We kind of documented all of that. So please comment. Let us know what you think about some of those faithful comments. We found it a little reassuring that people are kind of seeing the other side of it, which is a positive sign. Please like and subscribe to Mormonish Podcast. And I will say, we are trying to get to 10,000 subscribers, aren't we, Landon, by Valentine's Day? We just have this crazy goal in our head. I think we only need like 200 more. So if you have not subscribed to Mormonish yet, just hit that button and let's see if we can make that 10,000 by Valentine's Day. I think we can. I hope we can. So if you'd like to make a donation to Mormonish Podcast, we always have links in the show notes. We're a nonprofit and we have links to donor box. And boy, do we appreciate all of you that do. It really helps us to continue to do the things that we do and bring you the content that you guys like. We also have links in the show notes to our Mormonish merch store where you can pick up some fun Mormonish merchandise. And again, thank you so much, Landon, for co-hosting. This has just been the Fairview stuff, I know we covered a lot when new things happen, but I think it's important. It represents what's happening in all these different towns, and it kind of pulls the curtain on a lot of things to do with the church. So I think it's important to continue covering. So thank you, everybody. We will see you all next time on Mormonish. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Mormonish. We really appreciate our listeners and would love to hear from you if you have a story you'd like to share. You can email us at mormonishpodcast@gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and on our website, mormonishpodcast.org. And don't forget to look for us on YouTube and like and subscribe. Keep joyful, everybody.